should be up on your stuff, I'm assuming.
Okay, I'm just going to make sure it's showing up on Facebook. Everyone, if you can hear this, this is technically a podcast, and we're technically starting in less than 1 minute at 4:20, which is the beginning of many a good idea. Some old friends of mine were in a band called The Good Ideas, which was not unrelated to this concept that you could have good ideas when stoned. That like maybe they're just good ideas, and where's the rest of the implementation? But I guess they executed the album later.
I really dislike the whole idea of like stonerism and the kind of propaganda towards the like image of being a stoner, because ultimately it's like if you're stoned sitting on the couch watching cartoons, it's a bad look. It's ugly. It's like it's unbecoming. But the information and the thoughts that you could be having could be so profound and beautiful and like ineffable
I mean,
that you just come off like a weirdo.
see, if I were saying that, I would say that's a Protestant work ethic corrupting my soul or something like that.
Oh.
But I can't see I can't video, by the way.
If you're stoned sitting on the couch watching cartoons, it's a bad look. I hear.
Oh, is that the Twitch going?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I could hear my wretched voice.
Oh, so I just can't see your. Okay, we'll solve this issue right now. I just couldn't see your video in Discord.
Oh, weird. I wonder if it was just loading.
I can't see you at all in Discord.
Really? I can see you, and on my Twitch it says that it's.
And it was showing up. And it's showing up in the Twitch. I'll probably be able to see you in a second, Don.
I'm just gonna turn off the camera, turn it back on.
Actually, I can see you on the Caster website.
I wonder if it's like taking my video, so Discord doesn't want to show it to you or something. I don't know. Maybe it'll just pop
Funny
up.
because I see a bit of a lag if I go in here. It's first time doing this, folks. We'll have a smooth operation, and I'm not even I haven't even lit up yet. But what I mean, I can't really see you in real time, and it's distracting to watch the lag. So I'm just going to listen to you. So just be aware I can't see your face.
Okay, let me know if it just comes back up.
It's working, yeah. Because if I reload Discord, that'll restart the whole stream, right? Or will your thing will keep going and I'll rejoin it?
Yeah, you can restart Discord if you want. That's no problem.
One second, folks.
Uno momento to the 0 people watching. Oh, you know what they say, silence is golden.
Being golding. I can see you now.
Oh, nice. I can't see you, but that's okay.
Oh, that could be a problem. Oh, I just have to turn on camera. There we go.
Beautiful.
There we go. We have liftoff. Now it's you just disappeared. Oh, there we go. Are you now you're just fucking with me?
No, I'm hands up. Can you see me or no?
Yeah, you cut in and out a bit, but this is as good as it's going to get. So you were saying that, well, first of all, I mean, let's take apart that image piece by piece.
Okay.
Watching cartoons all day. Let's discuss this concept. When I was a kid, times when I watched cartoons all day, and actually, a friend of my mother's was more willing to watch cartoons with me than she was, because she felt it was somehow denigrating to watch children's programming. I think was kind of what was going on, and he saw no issue with it. What's notable is that she looked down upon him for being an adult who wasn't looking down on the cartoons. And it's almost like she was saying he didn't appreciate them from like an ironic adult distance or something like that. I mean, maybe my mom was just the first hipster after she got tired of being a hippie, but she doesn't even like these cartoons ironically. What the fuck's his problem? But you could be a cartoon scholar or something like that. I mean, presumably after you watch cartoons all day, you'd find something else to do all day. I mean, because hyper focus and doing the same thing all day, even if it's, ostensibly maybe you're just practicing hyper focusing in the moment, but you're just delving deep into something. It can be a very meditative thing because, if somebody goes to a meditation retreat and does literally nothing, people will venerate that and say it's spiritual. But as soon as you're consuming cartoons, someone could shit on the whole activity. Now, the thing is, cartoons are a part of our culture. What's the role of fiction in spending your time well? I mean, what if they were binging on The Simpsons? Okay, well, you say maybe binging is unhealthy. Well, what if they were watching different things all the time? Okay, well, maybe it's some television rots your brain. Like, okay, well, what if they're audiobooks? Oh, okay, so maybe the issue is content somebody chooses rather than whether they spend all day consuming content. Because what's really implicit is that somebody else is jealous that they can't do it.
Well, I think a big part of it is, like you were saying earlier, like the kind of Protestant work ethic. A lot of the time, okay, you say it's content, like the issue is the content, but who's making the content? Adults. And these are people who are inspired to basically like teach the next generation the lessons that they wish they had learned or they wish everyone had learned, so that way society as a whole can progress. And when you watch cartoons, it's always like, be nice to other people, or like appreciate the day. It's always like really basic things that are important that a lot of people end up losing in their hearts as adults.
I mean, to be charitable, let's say maybe the issue is adult watching cartoons isn't really challenging themselves, because if they're watching cartoons, and I think this is what my mother's worry was about this friend of hers. I think that adult who can only watch cartoons, let's say, I mean that's a bit extreme, but like are they avoiding challenging content and sort of staying in a phase because they don't want to face something unpleasant that's in other content? Because there's something safe about all the content in cartoons. In that case, you don't have the same criticism of somebody who only watches G-rated films.
Right.
Not that violence or something indicates depth, but you might think that like any movie that disturbs your soul isn't going to be G-rated. You might think it's going to be like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. I don't want to have to ask. If there's questions you don't want to think about, probably don't end up in the G-rated movies.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is it's about the potency of the themes. So it's basically like you're not going to have the same depth as you're saying.
In any story.
In any story, yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily...
No, you could... Sorry to interrupt, but now it was confusing.
It's okay.
You can animate any story. You can animate any story. So the question is, what's the story?
Right. So that's what I wanted to. That's like a question I had for like a couple steps down.
If you watch Bible cartoons all day, some people might think that was devout worship, and other people would think you're frying your brain, right?
And other people, like myself, would say you're just viewing the most recent iteration of a myth, and you can be getting extreme potent philosophy and virtue from that, way more than you're gonna get from fucking Two Broke Girls and Lucifer or whatever fucking sitcoms there are.
I don't even know what's on now.
Yeah, me neither. But what I wanted to say is that when it comes to content and it comes to, let's say, like maturity or like depth of the themes, the actual like some high intellectual concept, like you said, you can animate any story. So I wanted to ask you, do you watch anime, like Japanese anime?
Oh yeah, I mean my favorite anime is Puella Madoko Magi Magica.
I've heard of it. I've watched every episode
really
except for the last one of Madoka Magica.
Well, maybe there's some spoilers in this, but I'm just going to talk about what it's an allegory for, according to TV tropes, because I could tell it's kind of a take on Faust, like the Faustian bargain theme. And I think I was Googling for the title of the anime and the concept of usury, and there are very few results, which I always feel like I'm onto something when I search for something and I get like 3 Google results. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if it's on Google Scholar, I'm like, oh, okay, even people paid to come up with weird shit aren't thinking of this. But I feel like they're supposed to do that algorithmically, by the way, of like, should be like a list of like terms that get a small number of search results, so we can say like the more research is needed on these topics. It's supposed to just like the same old shit. Anyway, yeah, that's a topic. What did I say? Oh yeah, so the
Faust and Madoka Magica.
The TV tropes page came up explaining the allegory of the anime, and they basically said that the whole anime is an allegory for usury and for our economic system and of the sort of system of compounding debt and so on, that debt spirals that people get stuck in. But you wouldn't think of it. Okay, there's no mention of money or loans or interest or usury or a single word of economic jargon. And it's a cartoon. It's animated. Okay, and yeah, you need to watch it all day. It's about 4 hours to get through it all, and probably it gets so emotionally wrenching that you just be like, oh my god,
you miss it. You miss the themes.
I don't know, but no, I don't think you missed. Well, you missed that they're explicitly about economics. But I think you understand. I think actually in economics you miss the themes, despite like understanding the words. Maybe like because if you don't feel anything, have you really understood it when somebody's explaining to you? Let's suppose it's true that our entire economic system is exploiting people. I mean, maybe that's an overstatement. You know, there's a whole range of political opinion over there, but it's from that person's perspective who says the whole economic system is exploitative, like wage labor is a form of wage slavery, like it's only a temporary step to your utopia or whatever. Whatever your view is, you know, it's anyway. I like that anime, and so that's you could spend all day watching that. And oh yeah, so I was saying you can get it in a different way when you feel it in a narrative context.
Okay, so
like someone who's I don't know, someone who's doing math all day, you can say, okay, well that's great, but like what is going on in their emotional life? You know, if you can think of this from like an administrative perspective of like students coming into university and going into different fields. Like if there were better mental health and people were checking in with people, they might be like, okay, well, so you're specializing in math. How are you nurturing your emotions? And, you know, somebody who's in some other field, I'd say like, okay, that's great. But like, are you sure you can think straight? Like take a class in this other department, you know, like all these people out that way.
So two things. First thing, to that with the university students, to do that, you'd have to be making some pretty broad generalizations about the types of personalities that get into each field, which I actually think you could do, but I think a lot of people would take issue with that. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, notice I was talking the pipe dream of people getting individual attention at university.
But second thing,
not a big university.
More important thing, do you think that the economic symbolism per se in Madoka was intentional? Or the symbols are so
Must have been.
The symbols are so fundamental that they can be applied to any larger system.
Oh, they're just like if you write. So basically, like if you write an anime about exploitation that's good enough, there will be a way to map it onto the economy because the economy just happens to be another instance of exploitation.
Exactly.
I don't think so. I mean, it's let me put it this way. It could have been unintentional. I just feel like it feels. I don't know actually much about the backstory of how it was made. I remember reading the wiki once with Rosie, but it was like it seemed pretty. Well, the whole thing was planned out in a very conscious way in a lot of other respects. So I feel like it was very deliberate because they also presented it as in the magical girl genre as being like, oh, it's a safe cartoon because that fights exactly this thing that I'm complaining about, that people go to certain kinds of media to feel safe.
Right.
For some people, that's their idea of Facebook. That like I don't want to see the news on Facebook. I just want to see cat pictures or something. It's like, well, okay, like.
Instead, they want to see monogamy. That's gross.
That's the whole thing. I don't know. No, I don't think so. But there are no such posts, but. Because you don't need to advertise the dominant position, but Facebook's the most inclusive platform. Like your grandmother's on there. That's where you need political content because you have to resolve things intergenerationally, right? Like you want the generations to see the views of each other and not be in their own bubbles. And so, like, yeah, I mean,
is it more important to target the younger or older generations?
Neither, I would think. I mean, we can all vote.
Right. Do you think Did you think that we could outlast? So, like, say like the general idea, which isn't 100% true, but the general idea is like, well, the left is the young people and the right is the old people, and the old people are wrong.
What's the quote? Like, if you're before a certain age and you're a liberal, I mean, not a liberal, you don't have a heart, and you're past a certain age, you're conservative, you don't have a head. That's the claim.
Yeah, so it's
and
like
you do see this trope of like the rightward drift, like the Dave Rubin saga or whatever.
Oh yeah, but so say
chasing the money.
say the generalization that, the old like Republicans are 100% wrong and they're gonna ruin the world. Well, do you think that? I don't think it's necessarily true, but let's say it is because a lot of people think that way.
Chomsky thinks it's true. I mean, he's called the Republican Party the most dangerous organization in human history.
Right.
And then he flat out said, like, not being hyperbolic.
No, they probably are. They probably are.
And he's saying it largely because of climate change.
Oh, definitely. They're like, they are anime level evil villains in that way. They're literally threatening the safety of the world.
Playing chicken.
Yeah.
Playing a game of chicken.
Well, so that's what I want to ask is, the young people, if
What does it do with being old?
I know, but the idea is that they are old. Like, a lot of people make that generalization. So it's like,
do
you think we could outlast the old people by
like
influencing the young
there are
people?
young Republican climate deniers think they're going to benefit. It's actually true. Like they think that they're going to be in the time capsule or survival pod, or they're going to be in the moon colony or the place where the rich people survive on Earth. They think they're fine. Even thinking that shows that they're not fine, but.
Sounds like they need some cartoons, honestly. They think they're gonna live in space on a colony and like it's Halo.
They may have just had the wrong cartoons. I don't know.
There are definitely bad cartoons, that's for sure. Any group of interest is gonna target children, no matter what, and because they're the most potent group to target, I think.
Well, tell that to analytic philosophy. They're not doing it yet.
You gotta try. Well, that's
there are articles.
That's the problem. It's how
there are articles in the Abacus. There's an organization for teaching philosophy to very young children.
How close can you get?
There's two articles on there: of childhood and then childhood philosophy.
Well, what does it look like? Because is there not like biological limitations?
Some ways children are more naturally philosophical because they're operating from fewer assumptions, which is kind of what philosophy does.
Right, but how are they presenting it? Are they presenting it with like large words and a complex vernacular and like trying to teach them through a textbook, or are they teaching them through symbols and ideas and mythology?
Conversation, through the dialectic, the natural. Like Socrates in the Meno teaches the slave boy math just by scribbling in the sand. It's like it emerges out of a conversation. I mean, it's a fictional construct of Plato's based on Socrates or something, kind of like the Bible's based on Jesus. I didn't see the parallels very clear because I kind of wasn't thinking about Jesus much when I was studying Socrates, and then I got back to being like, okay, I'll think of these Christian concepts again, having distanced myself from them to have my own perspective or something. Jesus, I was like, oh yeah, they're both martyrs who died for what they believed in and all this stuff.
Oh yeah,
and there's articles, at least one each online if you Google them up. One saying, oh, was Socrates an anarchist? And another one saying, oh, was Jesus an anarchist? And with Jesus, it's an easier case because Proudhon, who coined the term, was deeply inspired by the Bible. So the Christian ideals of egalitarianism and like everyone having an equal soul, the infinite soul, and all this, and as much as it causes problems for the pro-life debate, pro-choice debate, and pro-choice, but without getting into that just now. The footnote, it doesn't solve everything, saying, oh, every soul is infinite and everything else has no life. It's like it makes us treat each other equal in some political system. It also doesn't let us, it closes certain avenues of thought that I think are very important in terms of the arguments for pro-choice. And it also denigrates the rest of nature. Because if humans have this infinite soul, it's like, well, fuck the earth. What is that? It's dead, lifeless bullshit. It would be better if it was us because we have an infinite soul of infinite value or whatever.
Yeah, Christianity kind of has this like cosmic narcissism attached to it that's underlying. Not even underlying. It's pretty blatant.
Well, it's like someone asked me recently what I felt about polytheism versus pantheism or panentheism. I was like, well, the latter's much better for the climate. In practical terms. Yeah. Like, because once you get past the point that you are arguing about which one is literally true, which is none of them, kind of including science, if you don't endorse scientific realism. I mean, we can speak as though science is literally true, that we're standardized that metaphor for the purpose of coordinating experiments. Because, like, for mythology, easier to everyone have their own interpretation because you're not trying to replicate experiments. To replicate experiments, you have to standardize semantics. And so science needs a language that is more standardized than a system of myths does.
Really, I would argue the opposite. I would say science can communicate a lot through mathematics, whereas mythology needs a culturally accepted kind of like dictionary of symbols that you use. Like, and we kind of have that.
Well, but no, like a dream dictionaries don't work, right? If
Well,
you, like you just take them as like what they say. Like you have to filter. Really, there end up being suggestions because you might have picked up on some of these cultural things, but you have to go through and toss out anything that doesn't resonate because the real judge is your knowledge of your own dream and how it connects to yourself.
I think
So
that, yeah,
when I'm saying
that's
like
true.
mythic symbolism can be a lot more personal in a way that science. Like you can do science yourself and be a scientific community of one, but part of the power of science is its social aspect. The sociology of scientific knowledge, they call it in philosophy of science or SSK. But anyway, the fact that you can replicate experiments, but you can't replicate experiments if you're not using the same language.
Right.
So,
So, okay, hold on.
science has an incentive to control language more than religion. Religion doesn't need to control language as much. In fact, religion benefits from being able to. Officials can kind of talk about both sides of their mouth because the interpretation is up to interpretation a bit. And they're like, well, in this case, we would interpret the text this way.
Okay. So hold on. Let me
You're
ask you.
telling
Let me ask you, a yes or no question. In
it. No.
in science, say we discover fire because we want to cook.
Really early. Okay, so we're stranded on the moon. We have to reinvent all of civilization. Okay.
Yeah. And we've had no previous conception of fire. We don't know its application or its uses, but we're like, we need to cook. We know we have a goal, and to get there, there's a step we need to take. So we take that step and we create fire. The fire, we now can cook, but we can do a lot of other things now as well with the fire. It's not just for whatever its intended use is. That's kind of like the basis of science. The things we discover, we're trying to discover fundamentals that can let us, apply them in a multitude of areas. And I would say if you had a symbolic, like hieroglyphic, like dictionary for myths, so you could say this is what the soul represents when we talk about it in myths. So if your soul is great and powerful, like, you can kind of understand what it means. Or if your soul gets taken, like, this is what it means. Because, and it would work because, like, as human beings, we all undergo the human condition. And I know there's a lot of philosophical thoughts on this, but this is what I take away. Because there's kind of like a standard human condition in given cultures. Like, our human condition here in Toronto is not the same as people in Africa, obviously. But within the Toronto culture, when we explain mythologies, it's able to hit God, I've explained this like shit, just try and bear with me. It's explaining something that's more fundamental to you, and then you apply that to the idiosyncrasies of your life. So we can all relate to the cold. So when we talk about the cold, we kind of know what it means. But then if I have certain goals in my life, if I want to be able to brave the cold, then I can take the Canadian mythology and apply the symbols of, what it means to me wanting to brave the cold or being someone who wants to avoid the cold. That sounded so but
Well, I wouldn't worry about that. Don't be self-conscious. But the keep in mind that the original claim was a comparative claim. So, absolutely, you need some semantic stability to have a social system of myths. You don't need as much because you don't have to. The myths aren't supposed to work in every context anyway. You're supposed to try to figure out, like, the phrase like it's true when it's true. Kind of thing. It's like, well, this is it's like if I showed you shape, like I don't know, like two triangles attached like a bow tie. It's like, is this shape true? Well, that's not a sentence, so it's not really true or false. But it's like, okay, but like, if truth corresponds to reality, does this shape correspond to reality? Well, sometimes it corresponds pretty well when there's a shape like that in reality, and sometimes not so much. And a myth is like a really complex shape that you can turn around and see from different sides. And from one angle, you can apply that perspective to reality, but then the myth, you can rotate it. And then after you rotate it, it applies to a different set of situations. That's how I look at it. And science isn't like that. Science is trying to figure out which way do you put it. I mean, at least that's the that's the orthodox view. I mean, you might say it's not actually what's happening with the different branches of science. Like biology is looking at it like this, and physics is looking at it like this, or something like that.
Yeah.
But
So you know how people say opposites stand
finding the
back to
element.
back?
Sorry,
You know how people say opposites stand back to back? That's like in like a.
never heard that.
Oh well, I like it a lot. It's one of my absolute favorite, one of my favorites alongside As Above, So Below, because opposites tend to, and you can kind of argue what is an opposite, but um, opposites tend to represent each other in weird ways. Like they mirror each other. That's the fucking idea. Like they stand back to back. Like everything is on a spectrum. So you start at hot and you go all the way around, and then you come back. You come to cold, and then you get so cold it'll have the same effects as being hot. It'll fucking like destroy you if you're too cold. The same way it'll destroy you if you're...
It's sometimes true. I mean, there's a horseshoe theory in politics, which is kind of like that. You know that concept?
No.
Like the spectrum is actually bent like a horseshoe, so that the far left and the far right are similar on the y-axis, and
Oh,
actually kind of close on the
I,
x-axis.
I fully believe it. I've
Like, on the
witnessed it.
y-axis.
Yeah. So anyway, um, opposite staying back to back, I would say this is a long walk for a short drink of water. Um, it's basically like science is like one for all. You discover fire, so you can apply it to infinite different things. You can have light, you can have heat, you can have this, you can have that. Um, and then mythology, which I think like storytelling, abstraction, art, that's like the opposite of science. It's like all for one. It's one thing that can be like anything to anyone. That's kind
Yeah,
of
so
like a huge idea.
myth is, to put it succinctly, if you're worried about a long walk, it's myth is more open to interpretation. They're both open to some interpretation, but myth is more open to interpretation, and the that's the strengths and weaknesses of science versus myth. Is that science is better for truths that are less context sensitive, and myth is they're not neither is absolutely either.
Yeah.
They're just
So in terms of education, wouldn't you say it would be better to not have myths up to such wild interpretation? Because then you get a lot of people who just like either completely dismiss the teachings of religion or follow them to like destructive teas. Wouldn't it be
let's
better
use
to
an
have a better
example because
understanding?
let's use an example because it's fresh in mind. Because I just commented on an episode of The Young Turks
Hmm.
where Cenk Uygur was describing how his Irish professor converted him to Islam and then he converted away from Islam again. And he said that the final last straw. It was interesting because then he got into talking about how him and his father started to try to deconvert his family from Islam, and it was kind of a good cop, bad cop method or something. But I don't know much about Islam anyway. But he was describing reading the Tower of Babel myth,
Hmm.
and I guess that's retold in that tradition as in a lot of texts because it's I think older than the Old Testament, that myth. Um, and he was just saying all these kind of like 90s atheist talking points and like identifies an atheist, but like there's certain thinking in atheism they're kind of like, oh come on, get rid of this. And he was just like, oh, it doesn't make any sense because why would God have to stop them making the tower? Because he's all knowing, so he would have known in advance they were going to make the tower. And it's just like, well, you could say this about literally any Bible story, any series of events. So it just keeps coming up over and over again. These so-called omni paradoxes in Christian theology, you know, of like omniscient or being omnipotent and so on, can cause various paradoxes. Can God create a stone so heavy you can't lift it? You know, can we have free will if God knows what we're going to do, and so on? And I mean, I'm just kind of saying, like, I'm an atheist, but you totally missed the point of this myth. It's not like a factual story. First of all, it's obvious that making the tower is not going to work.
Yeah.
Like from the beginning of the story, why would you take it literally? How stupid do you think these people are?
Yeah. Do you take Captain
Building a
America
tower.
literally? Oh shit.
Like if your 5-year-old told you, "I'm going to build a tower to get to heaven," you say, "Okay, that's nice. Like, tell me when you get there." Go, whatever. But if everybody was focused on this project, spending all their time on it, actually work. So it's actually good that they abandoned the project of the Tower of Babel because that's not how you get to heaven. Metaphorical heaven, let's say. And you know, this has nothing to do with whether you should be a theist. in my opinion. I think theism is about the literal existence of God. At least I think that's the semantics we have to work with, given the status of science and fundamentalism and everything interacting. Um,
A part of me truly believes
you
that
can deny the God is literal and still be like these myths have a point that aren't just like, oh, the people who wrote this book like made continuity errors or something.
yeah. A part of me truly believes that if the world, like if society shuts down and then begins to restart again, like apocalypse style, then there will be people praising the great, glorious battles of Captain America and his virtues and his strength and the great brilliance of Tony Stark and like trying to find this
Star Wars
lost civilization.
Star Wars wouldn't have made it this far without atheism.
Ha, that's true.
Right? Because it was filling a space that atheism had has open. Because atheists weren't trying to fill that void; they were like metaphor. I bother with such a shitty thing, but why would be actually true? You know?
Yeah, but then like
And, you know, at this point, I'm straw manning the straw manners, but
yeah. But then look at like people love the Chronicles of Narnia, you know, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when it is like blatantly the Christ story, the crucifixion. Like, it's canon.
and a little less.
Yeah, but then they love it. They love it because it uses different symbols. You have all, well, at least it's kind of dated, but I guess when I was in elementary school, that's what people love.
So your original question was, shouldn't myths be open to less interpretation? I don't think that it's good. It might be good that that myth can be misunderstood. Sounds counterintuitive, right? But if someone just told you, oh, you know, like, don't be hubristic, you could not disagree, right? You could be like, yeah, you're preaching to the converted man. Like, I don't want to be hubristic.
Yeah.
Sounds bad. I mean, people tell me not to be it, so why would I want their disapproval or whatever? You know, it's like,
Right.
okay, but do you really get it? Like, you know, what if you were transported to a culture and no one there had this rule yet? Would you start trying to spread it? If you were like a missionary of one for the concept of don't be hubristic, or are you just doing it because everyone else is telling you don't be hubristic? The thing is, you understand things better when you're figuring them out yourself.
And that's what
And
myths
so a lot
do.
of myths, I think, give people an opportunity to try out various interpretations. So one other thing you can ask is, well, what would have happened if the tower had succeeded? Like, never mind that it's obviously possible. What would be the upshot of actually succeeding with the tower? Also, what would be the upshot of never having multiple languages? Two big questions there, right? I mean, if you succeed with the tower, what do you like? What happens? Do you reduce the meaning of the difference between heaven and earth? I don't know.
Yeah. It kind of seems
course,
to be the goal of human beings.
But and if there was only one language, because what you could read the whole story is saying is just monocultures produce hubris.
Oh yeah, big time.
Right? Not like, oh, God will punish you for trying to get to heaven. I mean, because actually the Tower of Babel's in an old SquareSoft game, Final Fantasy Legend, where you do complete the tower, like the tower already exists, and you climb it to heaven, and then God tells you he was just fucking with you, and then you kill him. So that's a different way the story could go.
That's beautiful.
Speaking of anime, you know,
That's very that's very homocentric, to be like, we will finally complete the Tower of Babel and destroy God once and for all. Like,
well, I guess in this case, it's kind of like the creator turns out to be more like a Greek god, like just some kind of like a schoolyard bully, like a more powerful version of you. You're
like an
well,
alien.
Fuck you! Why did you build this system? It's not that different from because there's the grind of just going up this tower.
yeah.
And it's actually not that unreminiscent of the death spirals of Pueblo Madoka Magica.
Well, that's it goes back to common
Japanese.
symbols, and I guess they can.
You'll be rewarded.
Final Fantasy is beautiful in that way. It is an incredible, like modern telling of like beautiful myths, and
Myths is not the Hiroshima allegory in every game.
Oh yeah, I've seen articles about that. I'm not well versed in Final Fantasy, but I know of its legends. You know, I know of its status.
Well, it took me a while to realize that there was a Hiroshima allegory buried in every one of those games, because every game involves some like spell that's so powerful that it's like locked away, and like people have forgotten it. And because you could imagine, if you have a cyclic view of even human history, you think, oh, maybe fossil records are at least part of the story, and all this stuff got lost. I don't know how you film the story, but anyway, you've heard these various ideas before in myth and maybe in pseudoscience of like, well, maybe ancient civilizations go back even way more ancient. Maybe they had super advanced science, and it was so because it was powerful they destroyed themselves.
Oof.
And blah blah blah. I mean, that'd be more likely in another world on some kind of panspermia hypothesis. But
That's some of my
any rate-
favorite high thinking right there.
I mean,
Oh, I love.
oh, you mean high?
Yeah, I love thinking about ancient civilizations and shit, and like.
Here's a high question. What was I just saying before I started talking about other planets?
You were talking about Final Fantasy and what the myths mean.
Hiroshima.
Yeah, Hiroshima.
So there's always this. So the magic is locked away as if it were locked away a long time ago. Kind of like how nuclear waste has to have like cryptic to us because they're designed to be understood in some more universal way. It's cryptic in the sense of why isn't it just in English?
Mm-hmm.
And give some kind of universal warnings that people would understand in the distant future after an apocalypse to stay away from the nuclear waste. Because if it looks like you put a lot of energy into packing away, it can look like treasure.
Yeah.
You don't want people, see what I'm saying? So you don't want people trying to dig up the buried treasure and be like, it's fucking plutonium, we're dead.
That's a big theme in a lot of anime. Is someone wanting something for a long time and then they find it and it's not really what they wanted. They didn't realize.
So this horrible magic it's in every game, and usually it looks kind of like an atom bomb when you cast this spell. Sometimes it's Ultima, or sometimes it's some Meteo in Final Fantasy IV. Anyway, point is that there's a Hiroshima. Not to start missing the point and getting into real details like Shane Miller did with the Tower of Babel myth. Hiroshima myth. It was like I hesitate to call it propaganda because I don't think it was bad. But it was like Japanese propaganda reaching my child brain through these games, almost like the buggers trying to communicate with Ender in the Dream game and Ender's game or something. I realized it is such a powerful form of messaging because it was completely legitimate argument they're making of just fucking think about this, like your culture did this to us.
Yeah.
Think about it, young child. You'll think about it again later. I feel like that was completely intentional as well. And completely wise thing to do.
You know what I find hilarious? Because I am like a massive prophet of anime. I'll preach it. I'll preach it to the heavens. Honestly, I think it might be like the most enlightened form of media right now, aside from like high music.
I'll get you to give me a view of things. I want to watch a bit more and see what I can find that's really good.
Oh, I mean here's the big problem. With people getting into anime. There's a bunch of beautiful like 12 episode animes that are like 20-minute episodes, really digestible. But if you want, this is one of my most cringe takes. Honestly, send me straight to Tumblr. But anyway, I genuinely think that Naruto, I'm sure you're familiar, might be the best like modern myth.
I don't think I know Naruto, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, it's just so ingrained in Western culture as like everyone's first anime because it was on like YTV and like shit like that, like way back.
For me, you're younger than me. For me, that was Sailor Moon.
Yeah. So Sailor Moon, I have like vague memories of it. I know of it. I'm familiar. I'll identify with it as a weeb. Sailor Moon, but.
A great example of homophobia, how they had to edit all of the lesbian scenes to make them cousins. And make it not as obviously sexual. They cut out like all the culminatory aspects of the scene.
Really?
And they'd say, "Oh, they're cousins."
I didn't know there was any like lesbian overtones.
Characters now, but yeah.
And
similar to how the first lesbian kiss on television was in Deep Space Nine, but it was with the Trill symbionts, so it was almost like it was justified that psychologically, it was still well. Oh, okay. It was like giving it out to like a way to like calm your grandmother down or something like this. Oh, this is happening on television. But I think I noticed something in a previous episode with a Trill symbiont in Next Generation, the previous show, that I think they wanted to do it earlier and were forced to edit it because there's this really bizarre scene where at the end of the episode, this woman runs up to the woman and grabs her hand and kisses her on the wrist. It's like, if you're already running at somebody, like, is that, I don't know, like maybe I'm missing something. This is a great move.
Yeah,
I
it's
should
a
have just
little
learned.
weird.
But I've never thought like I want to run up to somebody and grab their arm and kiss their wrist, and then like, I feel like the issue. I feel like the episode was just written in a kind of a normal way, and then they were like, you got to change the part where two women kiss at the end of the episode.
Oh, and
Been.
you know that someone just came up to the writer at their desk. They're just like doing their thing. Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
you know that scene on like the last? Yeah, yeah, it's kind of gay.
90s, so they probably would even anyway. So that was the decade that terminology died.
But anyway, to go back to Japanese mythology. Um, so anyway, long story short, I will send you some anime that are good if you ever want some digestible ones. But the biggest problem is like things like Naruto, one of my personal favorites, Bleach, is these are the epics. These are like you know Gilgamesh, like the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, long ass crazy story. You know, a lot of Greek myths are really epics, long continuous, like trials and tribulations, world building, all that. The true epics of our time come in the form of like 700 episode, like just overly complex stories. And they're beautiful. They are incredible. But the places you have to go in your mind to like hold it all, that's where all the cringe starts to seep out. You have to get fanatical. And it's like you have to love these worlds. And it gets really easy to become lost and lose the symbols and then just be like, oh yeah, they've got their new form. Now they can make a bigger Hiroshima. It's just like, it sounds so simple, and it gets so, and in a lot of like American culture, there's so much parody, but it comes off as almost propaganda because it's like they hate anime so much in like modern sitcoms and like Western media. I find that when they depict Japanese culture and media, it is so unwatchable. It's so annoying. It's so like misses the point. It's a caricature of what it really is. It's when the mom walks past the TV station and they see a still frame of someone going ha, and then it's like, oh, that's what they're fucking watching again, just the screaming show, the screaming cartoon. But really, they don't see that it's them pushing against like their deepest fears, trying to overcome like massive amounts of adversity that like are so applicable to the child or what have you. So it's like, I don't know, there's this weird dissonance between, I don't even know where the fuck I was going, honestly. It's just this is just one. But I guess I could wrap it up by just saying, like, I don't know, Western media, it's like they're demons. They brainwash you with like magic power almost. They convince you. Yeah, they convince you that Big Bang Theory is top tier like virtue, and then it's like cringe, like, I don't know, like devil worshipping like thing for kids, when it's so the opposite. It's so flipped, and that's always the way. But it's such a hard thing to preach in this time because a lot of the teachings are like people could use them.
Well, yeah, actually, one more good moral teaching I got from an anime called Royal Space Force is sons must become stronger than their fathers, otherwise nations will grow weak.
Hmm.
I looked it up. I couldn't find it in English. Like, it was just how it was translated in that anime. I guess one day all the subtitles of every DVD will be online or something.
And
Ultra long.
a kind of just like mental practice that I do, not just with anime, but with anything, but particularly with anime, because I feel like the culture and the way they write is more geared to this way of consuming it, is that, so say Dragon Ball Z, are you familiar? Okay, yeah. So say like in Dragon Ball Z, if someone uses an attack with an overly complicated name, so you know, like the typical, like they yell out their attack, they're like bright beam ultra cannon, and then it's like, and they take like forever to charge it up and shoot it. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like when they use this attack, is it literally them like using their spirit energy to like hyper heat the air and obliterate their foe? Or does the name, or like even if it doesn't, I just assume absolutely that the name and the way the attack is presented has deep meaning to the arc of the character, even if it doesn't. The same way an English teacher would force you to write about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And when I do that, it's just the thoughts of the writer, the mindset, and it's like it merges with me. It's this weird like intimacy that you have between creator and consumer.
It's from charity, from charitable interpretation, right?
Yeah.
You have to look for what makes the most sense first before, like, because it's so easy to fail to enjoy a work of art, right? Like if you like, suppose you go to a comedy show and you're like, I'm going to try to not laugh.
Oh, exactly.
And I'm going to dare them. Okay, great. You just ruined your own night and several other people's. and how is that going to? Because someone might imagine like, oh, the truly good jokes. I mean, probably that person has issues, but someone who's say hostile to a particular genre, it could be due to sexism or racism or something like that, right? Like a racist listening to hip hop or a sexist listening to a female singer songwriter. They might be like,
definitely,
do not let the demon in my soul.
When really that's the demon speaking.
I'm sure you've known many, and hopefully when they were younger, who would say all sorts of stupid shit about music simply because a woman was making it.
Oh, for sure.
So much outright bullshit. Anyway, there's no need to catalog it, but like, that's not empathetic listening. And so it acts like it's a test of the music, but it's just a failure of their character. It's similar to like if you're critiquing a philosopher or something, if you don't read them charitably first, no matter how savage your attack is, it's going to miss the mark.
Yeah, of course. Like,
you have to aim before you fire, but that aiming has to actually come from a place of wanting to understand the person that you are critiquing. In the case of the philosophical critique, right?
So here's the thing, when
in the case of you have to try to feel into the artwork to be empathizing.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this about empathy. Originally came from art criticism, like the word empathy.
It's
about you have to empathize first, then you have a right to say something and with confidence. Like
it's an active practice. It doesn't just happen.
You have no reason to be confident until you've actually felt into the work, or say the person.
Yeah, a lot of people like things because it makes them feel, rather than liking something because of what they can make themselves feel by looking at it. It's like they think empathy is like involuntary, when it's an active practice for sure, I think. And then it becomes subconscious over time, and then the power your subconscious has is based on how much you exercise it consciously. But then, when people don't work out and they get anxiety, like a physical kind of like anxiety, and a lot of holistic wellness, kinds of people will say that like you feel a lot of anxiety when you're not active because your body, like, it has energy and it needs to move. I think the same thing happens when it comes to kind of psychic practices. Our psyche needs certain things. Obviously, everyone knows that.
The saying, right?
Yeah.
Idle hands are the devil's playthings.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like if you're not actively projecting your psyche and your ego onto, like, safely, you have to do it safely. The same way you have to get out energy safely, or else you're going to do crazy shit. If you're not taking in media and projecting yourself vulnerably onto it, then you're going to start projecting yourself onto people and onto the world. And more often than not, you only see the things in other people that you don't like about yourself. And it's this involuntary projection because people aren't actively deconstructing themselves, like when taking in media. Instead, they want media to be an involuntary practice. And people will say they're deep because they like, deep media just because it's not making them laugh. It's like it makes them cry or it makes them feel sorrow. But it's designed to do that. It's an assisted pull-up. You're not really exercising that well. At least that's like one of my biggest gripes with like the way people consume these days and how deeply ingrained it is in
Media is
even the
kind of giving
political
you a
system.
emotion rather than having media that's kind of giving you a guaranteed emotion rather than having more emotional ambiguity, so that you
Yeah, and that's fine. It's okay to have a tone and a theme and really go for it. Like that is impressive.
were saying earlier that it can be a feature of myth compared to science. It's more open interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah, but uh, not all art needs to be colorful. Not all art needs to be abstract or even look good. But also, when you view a war painting and it's brutal and it's gruesome, it's like your first thought is, oh, this hurts my heart. Oh, this is so brutal and gruesome. And it's like, wow, I wouldn't want to be there. Okay, but now try seeing it as beautiful. Try looking at like the the intimacy that it takes to battle with another foe, and the end results, the crimson splatterings of a violent orgasm. It's like it's incredible. It's
Okay.
you're viewing people's like raw
Trails.
yeah. Anyway, it's
But
difficult
I would
to.
submit to you that an important variable to keep in mind, I think, with any kind of artwork that indulges our like primal side, is there a healthy path for sublimation available? Right? Because that's what that's one thing art should help us with, is sublimating our baser instincts into a more productive arena. Like, for instance, everyone is going to hate something.
Oh, of course, obviously.
So you should choose a good target for your hate.
Country music.
You will. That's racist against Southern people. I think so. I think there's a racism. I mean, it's a culturalism. Like
There's
Northern
definitely
Southern.
a deliberate misunderstanding of their condition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hey, like I love Dolly Parton.
That's true. She
There's,
is. She is quite
it's
the
not my
idol.
favorite genre. Every genre is worth empathizing with. I don't think you can discount an entire genre. I think even if the best example of a genre isn't so great, it probably could be. Maybe the best work in that genre hasn't been discovered yet. Think of a genre as almost like a system of equations. It's like, well, what's the best solution? Maybe people have found bad solutions in your opinion to the system of equations, but like, it's in that case, then the game's probably not over.
Yeah, just keep running the numbers. And you know what? On the topic, on the topic of country music,
On one day,
over the course of the pandemic, I've found the genre horror country, and it's incredible. It has opened my mind to country music a little bit more. It's like I'm not turned off by the fact that it's horror country. I still don't like the sound that most country makes, but horror country is incredible. And it's like, if you just see country music, horror country, that sounds ridiculous, then it's like, I don't know, you kind of sound just like a villain.
well, and like that's also judging before you've listened to it, which is like,
And it's become one of my favorite genres. It's so unique, but inspired.
one thing I think would help nowadays is more common reflection on the etymology of prejudice. It's prejudging. That's the common psychological mechanism, is making a confident. I used this principle earlier. Making a confident conclusion on the basis of a small amount of information. So, like being certain what somebody's like who you barely know and barely spoken to. Or like
Arrogant.
yeah, or judging a genre based on its name. That's prejudice. It's extreme prejudice. If it's like, I don't want to hear it or something. Of course, a lot of it just boils down to insincerity. They're not really talking about the subject matter in some cases. They're just finding a way to riff on a topic because they just want to airtime and like do a theatrics or something. There's a place for that, but it's a very difficult way to have an actual conversation, so to speak.
Sorry, I just want to I just want to move away from this topic a little, because I have something I actually want to talk to you about, like, specifically.
And then we have to do we'll have to clip this up into like sections and stuff.
Oh yeah. I've actually
That's
been
really-
meaning to start doing that and then posting my streams on YouTube. So maybe this will be the first one I'll do that for. Um,
Okay, so
okay, I'm writing a story. I'm doing. I'm trying to do a comic book. It's one I've wanted to write since I was a kid, and I've been obsessed with it so much so it's literally like ruined my life. How obsessed I am with it. Everything. I swear to God, like it's not even a joke. It's legitimately debilitating. It takes over my life. I failed out of school because all I want to do is think about it. And over the past year, I'm shit at drawing. Um, but I got like a drawing tablet and I start doing like sketches and like I just they're so crap, but they're inspired and I work with real illustrators to get them done properly and I do the writing and so on and so forth. So it's a real production and coming to the actual writing of the nitty gritty is proving difficult because the concept is something I'm passionate about, but I can't put into words. So I feel like someone like you who's thought a lot about intimacy could help with that.
I don't know if I've a lot. I mean, maybe
Okay, more than anyone I've
I
seen actively like go through discourse around it.
don't know. I have no idea what people are thinking in their spare time. But,
Right. Okay, well this is
ask me
what
a
I'm
question.
thinking and bear with me cuz I know it sounds morbid. So just bear with me. Um I think that like we were saying before, opposites stand back to back. I think that there is a commonality between kind of like I described with the war painting, uh, between intimacy and violence. I think sex a lot of the times, like when you talk about like actual like traditional like missionary penetration, it's like it's very violent in a weird way. It's so layered. It's so layered. There's like emotional parts of it that aren't, and that's where you kind of get a lot of the playfulness I think from. But anyway, so
There's a big difference between violence and aggression.
pardon.
There's a big difference between violence and aggression.
What's the big difference? Um.
I said
I,
there is a big difference.
oh. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you want to explain?
Oh well, I mean, I think aggression can more easily be healthy than violence can. I mean, and I mean like I don't mean like the sense in which speech is violence and that kind of thing. I mean like physical violence. Um,
Hmm. Okay. So
I mean,
yeah,
'cause not
aggression's
all
more of a trait, and violence is like an actual action that's
sex, which is
happening.
not very violent at all. But you could say that there's some aggression, and then that like there's a certain amount of physical exertion involved, and like that involves a certain kind of motivation, which has an aggressive nature.
Posturing,
But you
things
could,
like that.
but you like, what the difference between aggressively doing your chores and violently doing your chores? Right?
That's a good
You
one.
would like mopping the floor violently is far less effective for one thing than mopping the
Now
floor
that's an
vigorously.
anime. That's how you describe anime. Mopping the floor
There are two
violently.
families with glass windows and they glass houses, and they just like compare their aggressive versus violent styles. Um,
Okay, so
be careful about because look, there's a slippery slope argument that sometimes you'll encounter, and as you say, you might encounter it in darker circles. I don't know what you read, but the it can be quite a slippery slope if you don't distinguish those two concepts, right?
right, right,
Because you
right,
could hear,
right.
well, Susie at school says her mom mops the floor violently, so that's how floors should be mopped. Or I don't know, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
point discourse, you're getting these words. Like if you're not careful about that, it's a very different thing.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's where derangement comes in. Because Susie could be at home and she could say love is violent because Mama's getting beaten on the low, and Mama's
Well, that's
okay with it.
she thinks maybe.
Yeah,
Mama's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, you're right. There is a semantic distinction, but I don't necessarily mean violence, but that is important. Um, so
Yeah.
so then I would say the proper opposite to make would be intimacy and aggression. Do you think? Because or to say that
Well, that's
they can be interchangeable in some scenarios, or both be happening at the same time. My story is allegedly
It means to
allegedly.
fuck yeah, and
Yeah, yeah. So my story is basically not to get too nitty gritty or like nerdy about it. It's it's like there's like a pantheon of like higher beings, like higher dimensional beings who value aesthetics over anything else. Um, they take human form because they think it's the most aesthetically pleasing, and they compete for points. Basically, they're basically
why why is the human form most aesthetically pleasing to these aliens?
I was gonna make some like weird like overlap between like I'm literally wearing like a Da Vinci shirt, so I was gonna like make like this and put like a what's it called, like a pentagram, and then like the Fibonacci sequence, and be like, ah, yes, it's the most pleasing. Just some bullshit, just so it's relatable.
I feel like we're just a stage as a species, but anyway, go on.
Yeah. So and the like part of the imperfection is the aesthetic. So so they basically
First,
they basically compete for points by doing things that they think are aesthetically pleasing with their like godly amounts of power. The problem is that they are completely deranged. They're basically demons, and they think the things that are the most aesthetically pleasing, or the things that they discovered, however long ago in ancient times, that the thing that gets them the most points are the things that are the most like fucked up, basically. The things that are the most aggressive
you're
and violent. So there's this weird like
giant
what?
giant edge lords.
Yeah, massive edge lords, just like to the max. But they think that being like a monster, or being just like overly aggressive, being an animal, is the worst. So they have to like, it's worse than just being regular. So it's like they have to walk a very fine line, and I represent it through, or what I think the best archetype to represent this is the vampire, because vampirism, that aesthetic, that way of being, it symbolizes demonic power mastered in human form, and it's sexy and it's seductive and it's beautiful and it's so powerful. It's untouchable. It's mastered death and life, and it's like perfect. It's perfect. It's the perfect human predator. So the whole thing is that they have to be deranged but sexy, and it's like they love violence, and they like regenerate and whatever, so they can do the most violent things to each other, but they have to do it in a way that looks good. So it's like they're getting like physical pleasure from it, and they love it. They love images of like deranged, like Ed Gein, like the fucking like guy who made furniture out of people. They would love that. They would think that's a beautiful aesthetic display, but it's too time consuming to get them enough points.
Okay.
So I just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts were on the idea that like what a deranged person would think about like intimacy and aggression. What would a deranged neutral god think about like human intimacy and aggression, like through violence?
Deranged neutral god, is that what you said?
Yeah, or not neutral, but like disinterested, like doesn't care about humans, doesn't care about like the goings on of this universe, is beyond this universe.
Well, my first question is, why don't you want to know what a really good god would think first?
Because I have a sense of divinity within me that is good to like a kind of like classical sense, like in terms of like the spirits within me, just my psyche, really, just like my virtues, and what I think about like I've seen the beauties in intimacy. I've been there, at least to a level that I find satisfactory. I haven't been to the deranged levels of like violent intimacy other than like, you know, hype when watching like certain, you know, anime or whatever, and then like someone does something crazy and violent and cool. But in terms of like actually like fucking and like, or like things like violent acts that like represent sexuality.
Well, this does tie into our previous discussion about the myths, and like their function, because talking about a god, you're asking me to give you an interpretation of what this god, with the perspective this god would have on some things, and I imagine we'll get to that, but I want to point out a few things first. So like, I mean, look, the Christian God is logically impossible because of the Omni paradoxes. I would argue. I don't think they're avoidable, except for the fact that it might be okay that God's a paradox, and that's the part that a lot of atheists can't fathom. Because a paradox can still be a good role model, because basically you have all these virtues, and the Christian God is supposed to be the set of all perfections, and at least that's the theology I find easiest to work with, now that I've exposed to a lot of it. But you think of the Christian God as the set of all perfections, and these various perfections, like how much knowledge you have, how much goodness you have, how like liberating you are from like an anarchist perspective, you know, and how empathizing you are, and all these things, and your power, how omnipotent, how powerful you are. They all are ideals that, in principle, you want to be more powerful. In principle, you want to be more honest, or more good, or more knowing. You know, in principle, you want to be more liberating, etc. But for instance, the liberating and the knowing come into conflict, and like, well, if God's all knowing, then how can we have free will? Blah blah. So once they reach that maximum, they come into conflict, and they become contradictory. And you know, you also imagine like a surveillance state eventually knows too much, and then we don't have enough freedom, right?
Then what's the point?
It's not that different from the Tower of Babel, actually, that you don't actually want it to succeed, even if it doesn't make sense, even though it's actually impossible. And the Tower of Babel, it's more of a metaphysical impossibility to reach an abstract thing like heaven, which doesn't have a time or a place, via a physical process. Building in a single spatial direction is it's just like the thing completely missing the point.
Yeah.
The point.
Some flat earther shit.
Where's the point? It's like, yeah, you can't aim at heaven with an arrow in direction, as theist or atheist.
Oh, you could just point inward, though. It'd be so beautiful.
So you imagine this God as like the role model, because basically the character that's constructed out of people's values to serve as a shorthand for all the values as a role model. And so it's like you're supposed to imagine a person who's much better than you, in terms of knowledge and power and all these things. And the thing is that the ideal that you imagine that's supposed to be the attractor, logically impossible. That's okay, because you're never going to get there.
Right.
You will not become the paradox. That's not a danger. It's not the paradoxical part isn't the part you're emulating. You're not starting with like trying to be as paradoxical as possible, because that's not one of the axes. That's not one of the goods. It's not a good to be paradoxical. It's good to get as much of these things as you can, which is not paradoxical, because you won't maximize them.
Right.
In fact, then the question is, okay, what's the trade-off? What's the exchange rate? What's the economics of these values, right? Like, you know, would you rather have more of a surveillance state and people have less freedom, or would you rather have people have more freedom and have less surveillance? Well, that's political, and you know, I don't know there's an easy theological answer to anything like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. Definitely not that's easy to describe in theology, but if this makes
sense. For instance, I don't know much about why usury was originally a sin, but it's started to strike me that maybe if usury had remained a sin, climate change wouldn't be a problem right now, because people wouldn't have been able to build so rapidly all of this stuff. Maybe they already acted this out on a small scale and like exhausted resources in other settings. They had uncontrolled growth. I mean, it's not hard to come up with the rules. Like, it's a pretty simple system, capitalism.
Yeah.
You boil it down to very simple rules. You could run it for a while and be like, oh shit, we used all our water, or we used all our grass, or whatever it is, you know? And be like, we've got it. Let's make usury a sin, so we can't like get ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
See, the thing with that, I would say, like, with usury being a sin, think about like back in the day, you have 5 sheep or whatever, and you're like, okay, don't fucking use all my sheep in one day, asshole. And then, or God's gonna fucking get you, I swear to God. And then, but then, it's practical. It's practical. And then as society progressed over, centuries and what have you, we start to become more affluent as a species. And then we forget we ever needed to care about that. And then, but then as above, so below, don't use all my fucking sheep turns into, hey, stop cutting down all the goddamn trees. There was just like a brief period where we could chill and just be rich and live in like perceived infinity. And now the ice caps are melting because we were just like a bunch of dumb ass fucking monkeys.
Artificial abundance, the reverse side of artificial scarcity. You
Yeah.
Unpriced externality like pollution, where you're not paying to pollute, and that you're shifting the cost onto everybody else. And they call it unpriced externality. It's like artificial abundance.
Just to go back a little bit, so because I want your perspective, like, again, because we're still kind of deconstructing what it is, and that's fine.
Okay. So this God thing. So the
let me just
so
detail what the gods are, in terms of their
sorry,
lore.
1 second though. So right at that point that I finished with, that there's a question then of the exchange rate between the values that are being referenced. I suppose for some psychic reason, I mean, the other thing I was going to ask or mention about how I'm going to try to answer this is that how you answer a question like this depends very strongly on the motivation for asking it, because there is no specified exchange rate. If you're talking about explore Satan or Beelzebub or the ultra demonic, and you're doing it for some reason, like suppose that you're doing it for science versus you're doing it for pleasure. Take those two motivations, right? You might say you get pleasure from science or something like that, but like there's a certain class of kinksters, is my understanding, that are very driven by curiosity. So they want to try. It's called being experimentalist. Is that one of the categories they have in the BDSMtest.org? You can do a.
Cool.
It's not very but there's a questionnaire that.
I'll do that live.
I think these psychometrics will be improved a lot in the future, because there's a stigma against researching this thing anyway. So like, how many psychologists are going to spend their masters improving BDSM tests?
Yeah.
They might have difficulty getting published. I don't know. At any rate, so anyway, category on there is experimentalist. And I've heard people talk about this kind of category before. With like, one of the things that drives them is just wanting to know things they don't know about experience in different acts and psychological states and so on. And the two people both have that same motivation. It's like makes sense from that perspective. Of course, it's not to say that anybody's reduced to one motivation. That obviously everybody's got a mixture of various motivations for everything they do.
Yeah.
Reductive about it. And somebody who wants to do it for knowledge, they would prioritize the things they hadn't experienced yet. Somebody who's doing it for pleasure is going to prioritize the things that are giving them the most pleasure. Right? Now, those are both pretty simplistic reasons, and I'm not sure I can relate entirely to the desire. I know it's something that people experience a lot. This deep curiosity with like, I mean, I can relate to it in the scientific level, I guess, in terms of like, because in terms of, if you think about music, I've always thought music, how do you explore all the states of possible experience, like the darkest emotions and so from an artistic perspective, and so from to make this comic book, it makes sense to create the characters in sense of exploring narrative space. But as I asked you at the outset, it's like, well, why didn't you visit a good place first?
Right. Well, I'm bored of the good place.
It seems like a matter of moral inoculation, I guess.
Right. There's no story to tell. Not one that I'd like to tell. It's boring to me.
Yes, you like Batman more than Superman.
Yeah, buddy.
So I converted from Batman to Superman as a young child.
See, but then
really with me.
But then fuck Batman, fuck Superman. Naruto, greatest modern myth.
Sorry.
I know, but I'll take generic anime spirit over both any day. But yeah, in terms of like light and dark, yin and yang, I'm definitely on the darker side. I'm bored of the lighter one. I admire demonic energy because I'm neutral to its moral standing. And what demonic energy means to me is that it's well, a demon originally coming from daemon, which meant a great like desire or like a something. It was like something that was so overwhelming that you wanted that you sacrificed everything to get it. And it was the only reason I know this is because I tried to learn the violin and there was an exceptional violinist who people
Like
thought were the devil.
Paganini.
Yes, that's my boy.
Yeah, so to mention Paganini, yes. Paganini or Faust or Puella Madoka. It's the same
Yeah.
story. In fact, there's a violinist in Puella Madoka who's part of one of the Faustian bargains.
Oh,
actually.
beautiful.
So you basically see a Paganini reference in that anime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we are in a society of demons, honestly, and the consequence of being a demon, they're often not that bad, until the end, because you will gain power, you will gain, you'll get what you want, you know. You might not get it how you want it.
But what happens to everybody else?
What do you mean?
You're describing it from the perspective of the character, in a very self-interested, from the perspective of a self-interested character. Like, is gaining power, is that good necessarily?
Well, yes, yes, because
that was the positive god had the all omnipotence anyway. But anyway,
yeah. I would say yes, gaining power is good because power in general is so abstract that you could be powerful in so many different ways. You could be powerful socially, you could be powerful because you're wealthy, you could be powerful because you're just physically strong. There's so many different ways you could be strong, but it doesn't matter because there, you know, like Apple, there's an app for that. It's like, well, there's a demon for that. It's like whatever you want, there's a demon for that. And I think
but
we have
wouldn't you want your power to be proportional to the probability you'll misuse it?
Well, here's the thing. This is why I love anime, because anime, the main characters tend to have, or some character tends to have a demon like inside of them, and this is a massive common theme. It's literally cringe, like how much of a theme it is, a cliche. And they go through various trials and tribulations, so much like inner work, like literally like going inside of themselves and fighting their demon, because the demon has so much power and potential and it will never leave them. But when it takes over, it's such a spectacle. It's the most hype parts of the series. So the main character has to learn to not get taken over in heightened situations and master the power. And once you do, it's hard though. Not everyone does. Most people are eaten by demons and they're just, you know, husks walking, just projecting demonic energy, because we're in a society that breeds demonic virtue. But if you're able to master it and have some more nuance and some control over where you apply it, and let me say, this is when I'm referencing the anime, it doesn't necessarily mean that I think you're gonna be outside, you know, like with like god tier rhetoric, like rallying people in the streets because you're a high tier demon. No, it means that you have the ability to, from within yourself, call forth like usually massive amounts of focus and determination towards whatever it is you want to do. When you're controlled by a demon, that force, that determination, that focus, it's all towards things that you don't have control of. And then you start having so much dissonance within yourself. You can't focus. You're fucking upset with everything you do because you kind of want to do it. You kind of don't. Nothing's satisfying because you have no control over what the demon wants. Most of the time, it just wants like sex and shit.
This vibe is different than the demons of the comic book that you were describing.
No, because they just take it to an extreme level, but it's the exact same virtues. Because a demon, like aesthetics is a demonic virtue. I would say it's on the yin side, you know? It's on the darker side of magic, per se. If like aesthetics was like a magical power you could like level up, it's on the demonic side of magic, I would say.
I'm going to try to complicate this whole question. So
yeah.
I think part of the problem is that we're trying to reduce everything to one axis, and that's a problem in a lot of things. That's actually part of the problem of capitalism. Is let's put a dollar value on everything.
Right.
Um, so something I said a long time ago, not that long ago. I wish I had realized this before, but sometimes being nice is being mean to someone else. I certainly recognized it in some context, but I didn't have it as a context insensitive generality. Of course, it still does it sometimes, but you still have to know when it applies. But like the idea is that like watch for this all the time, because in order to be a nice person, you have to be mean when it counts.
Okay.
And not be a bystander.
There are themes like that in my story, actually, and they come in multiple levels. So you'll have like a sage-like character who embodies like a fundamental good, and there's a powerful way to be, and again, a very high anime theme, because the good guy is punching the shit out of the bad guy.
Well, it's like I just remembered that we didn't fully get into this thing about I think power can be bad. So I was just talking to Rosie last night about, you may have heard that David, the Koch brothers, the living one, was recently recanted and said that they should have invested all this money supporting Republican climate denial.
They're probably feeling the
like,
Twitter
wow,
heat.
I bet he wishes he was weaker if he really believes what he's saying now, right? Like, basically, if you think, oh fuck, we invested billions of dollars, like driving the car toward the cliff, I really wish we had had half as much gas in the tank.
Right. Well, no one would say that he is a master demon. I would say he was eaten by his demon. Any billionaire's probably been eaten by a demon.
Yeah, okay, but you understand that in that case, it was worse that he had more power.
Yeah, he had a very powerful demon, and he couldn't control it, and it made him billions of dollars. And invested it in the Republicans. Not to like take responsibility away from him, because that's not what I'm saying. But I'm talking about like his psyche, his mindset during that time. It's like, yeah, his demon would have benefited from being less powerful for sure.
And so would everyone else have benefited from him, like in the collective interest.
Yeah, no one likes the bad guy.
Right. Yeah, and so the bad guy, it's in the collective interest for the bad guy to not be powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so power is an absolute concept. Yeah, definitely.
And why amplify the power of a bad guy story if it's in the collective interests? Just asking this question. What in general? I just think of it generally like if it's in the collective interest for bad guys to have less power, why would it be in the collective interest for them to have more power in a work of fiction? Because you could look at a work of fiction and say the bad guy is not bad enough.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think that in the real world. We don't think, oh, geez, I wish the worst people in my community were even worse. Nobody thinks that.
Why do you like shooting people in Call of Duty?
Why is it a reason to speak of a work of fiction to say that when it's not? And note that somebody can get confused and think that reality is like a work of fiction, that they're supposed to play a part like that and do theatrics or something, and that can be the beginning of a deep degeneration, that they're justifying real actions in aesthetic terms. And I guess that's what you're getting at with these demons.
Yeah. So here's the thing. My personal philosophy is a very unpopular neutral, and I'm very case by case, but like I have multiple levels. So again, it's like it depends on where it is. When it comes to like political, I'm like no, I'm not gonna apply some like weird like idea of like violence and aesthetics. But if you're talking about some underground bare knuckle boxing fight club, yeah, I might show up a couple times. But
politics?
Yeah, but I don't think we should have bare knuckle boxing in politics, you know? But personally, like I have personal philosophy. I have like a demon that likes the aesthetics. That doesn't mean I'm out here like gawking at like rape or anything, but it's like it's more like if take like a drug addict, for example. I could look at a drug addict and I can be down with them. I could be down with someone like just doing coke, and I can like be there chilling because I'm not judgmental in that way, and a part of me like enjoys the energy that's being like put off. And again, it's a demon. It's a demon, but when I say that, I don't say it negatively. It's yin energy. It's dark magic. But it's not bad because I'm not Christian. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think? I mean, neither am I, but I don't feel like I'm on board with that perspective.
What do you mean?
I mean, why does not being Christian mean that the like shouldn't the
I say that as just a generalization for what most people would say is good and bad, like because I'm using demon as like a symbol.
Okay, so like, is there a concrete example of something that somebody's done, say in the popular media, that most people think was a bad deed and you think was a good deed? This you're telling me that there's some exceptions like this that you feel you have a minority opinion?
It's hard. Okay, wait, hold on. I just don't want to say good or bad because I can say it's bad, but I like it. You know what I mean? Because because personally, like, I don't see a good or a bad because. Pardon?
A sick fascination.
Yes. So, do you know Joey Diaz in the media? Podcaster, been on Joe Rogan a shit ton.
I've heard his name before.
Anyway, he's like big into, or he was like a big like coke addict, and he like kidnapped somebody like way back in the day, and like it's like a big part of his character. But he's like reformed now, you know. He's like a lamenting older man, like who's come to terms and like, you know, that type of shit. So it's beautiful, but when he talks about it, he's famous for his comedy because he talks about back in the day when I kidnapped this motherfucker, I still message him on Facebook every anniversary. And it's like, it's hilarious that he messages this person that he kidnapped on Facebook on the anniversary of every time that he kidnapped him. It's like, it's beautiful and it's hilarious. And there's like something more to it. There's something pleasurable about it, about like indulging in consuming it. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go out and kidnap people, but it's like, I don't really mind, and I can see, like, I can have fun with the fact that you did it.
You know how exposure therapy seemed paradoxical at first in that why would the cure be the same as the cause? You know, if you're like scared of snakes, snakes cause, why would they remove the fear? The difference is that you're doing it voluntarily. That you're in control of it.
I love it. I'm addicted to it. That's why I'm writing this story. Because there isn't enough. There isn't something that really scratches the itch. So I'm just gonna take it all the way for myself because I want to see it done. It's like I said, I'm obsessed.
I mean, do you feel there are insufficient examples in human history? I mean, this is kind of a boring question to ask when you're talking about writing a work of fiction, but
yeah.
I mean,
you have Vlad the Impaler, beautiful demon.
Was enough to make my grandfather lose his faith, is what he told me once. And like, isn't that enough? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
well, okay,
pretty horrific. Like, archipelago and watch the world at war.
Yeah. And, so it is terrible. See, the thing is, have you watched Rick and Morty? No.
Just a few episodes.
Okay, so the cool thing about Rick and Morty. The cool thing about Rick and Morty is that when you're with Rick on when he's on set, you're safe because he's the most powerful being in that piece of fiction. And it makes everything fun as fuck. Even though he is
Doctor Who.
Yeah, but the thing with Doctor Who is a hero. Allegedly. I haven't seen it, but he embodies more of like a classic. Yeah.
But he makes people around him feel safe with his confidence.
Rick, it's like you feel safe because you're a viewer. But if you were around him, you would feel scared as fuck. Because anything could happen and he doesn't give a shit about anyone. Yeah. It's someone just walked in with a shotgun and they have all the power in the universe now. Except this guy literally has all the power in the universe. So it's fun to watch him go and just like blow up a planet because like it gave him the minerals he needed to make an ice cream machine or like something like that. Even though it's morbid as fuck and I'm not going to actually do it, it's like I can go along for the ride. And I'd say the same for this. The thing is, it's not fun, my story. I wouldn't say it's fun. It's fun in that the actual, like, I'm very passionate about dancing and fight choreography, because the same way intimacy, violence, blah, 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 I think fighting and dancing are also interchangeable, and that one's more of an artistic... Interchangeable.
Take a loose analogy. I wouldn't call them interchangeable.
No, I would say they're 100%
Really?
interchangeable. I've done both. I've
You seen the movie-
done Muay Thai for years. I danced for years.
You seen the movie Black Swan?
No.
Watch it. From what you're talking about, watch the movie Black Swan.
Cool. I will.
I don't want to spoil any of it. Just watch it.
Okay,
Anyway,
beautiful.
there's dancing.
Okay, good. But yeah, and a lot of anime represents this, because fight choreography is a huge part of the culture. It's a huge, like, merit that you get.
Yeah, in Final Fantasy, for instance, the music really is intended. It targets the space kind of in between fighting and dancing.
Nice. Yeah, no. I have the perfect song. I'll send you this incredible song by a band named Jizue, which it sounds exactly like JRPG fight music, but it's so, like, upbeat. It doesn't feel like fight music unless you've played JRPGs. So I'll send it to you. But anyways, that's kind of the gist. It's like, it's fun to go on this ride, but I'm exploring something that's harder for people to explore inside themselves, which is to suspend your common morality and be like, well, when you watch this demon, like, force someone to their knees so hard that their kneecaps just explode, just to have them, like, fillet a gun and then, like, blow their head off. It's like, to find a place in yourself where you enjoy that because the aesthetics of the actual, like, animation or images is good. Like, it's just really beautiful, and the characters are hot, and it's like, it's all done well. And the one filleting the gun, the one having their knees exploded, the one getting their brains blown out, they love it. They have faces of extreme pleasure. And it's like, well, if that's their culture, if there are like a group of demon siblings and they like to beat the shit out of each other in this way, like, why can't you enjoy it?
Well, maybe you should tell me. I mean, what's the difference between a healthy and what I'm not understanding is why you aren't foregrounding more a certain question. Maybe I'm too careful, but to me, the first question should be, what precautions do you take before engaging in this kind of mental descent? Analogously, for instance, if you want to take a bunch of drugs and, like, explore the spirit realm that way, I think you should learn to think straight first.
Yeah.
Right, like, logically, and that's a different kind of chaos.
Right. Well, it's like you stretch before you work out.
I think before experimenting with nonsense, you should learn to make perfect sense. I think for experimenting with evil, you should have a sort of a pre-stage of goodness that somehow inoculates you. In fact, you could
Do you think?
imagine
Wait, hold on. Did you mean in terms of the narrative or in myself?
some kind of principles going in, like for instance, take the debate about violent video games, right?
Mhm.
About, like, do they cause violence? Are they cathartic? Are they an outlet for people who would otherwise commit other violence? I don't know. I mean, presumably, it's going to depend on the game to a degree. Maybe not. Maybe that's not the biggest factor. But so you could ask, what's the difference between a video game that makes you like if there's two games and one makes people more likely to kill people than the other one does, even if they're both making people less likely, let's say, but like one more so in that direction. Wherein lies this difference, and how could one construct video games in a way which make them? How can one construct a violent video game in a way that doesn't promote violence?
Okay, consent, because the same way violence and sexuality, I think, kind of, again, very general terms, the same way they kind of like have some interaction, consent is a big part of violence. And the difference here is that the lore, what's being presented in the story is that this is what these people love. This is, again, it's siblings beating each other up, and it's like this is their culture and that's how they interact.
Okay, but that's kind of. I'm talking about like what's healthy for the author and the reader. Those are the real people.
Okay, so
involved.
wait, hold on. So, do you think that consenting
Healthy for
adults
a-
can't kill each other?
No, I think they can't kill each other.
Okay,
I'm
well
not supporting
that's where
killing
we
each
would disagree fundamentally.
other. Okay, so like the German cannibal, you think that was okay?
I don't know the story.
The guy. Oh God, no, fuck! Now I have to tell this story. I thought this is how I did not tell the story. I thought we knew the guy met somebody in personal and he wanted to kill him and eat him. Like,
Mhm.
there's more.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think suicide should be legal. I mean, I don't think it should be stigmatized. People.
I don't care if
think
it's legal. I don't care if it's legal.
it should be authorized to intervene because often it's a mental health issue.
Well, I'm pretty blatant about the fact that I have pretty severe mental health issues. I'm kind of aware of the deranged nature of the story and the role it plays in my life. I'm aware of the obsession and kind of how that interplays with it. But again, it's demon power. And also the what.
Even if they could, because I was already accepting that, okay, this is larger than life, so that these gods engaging in their consensual BDSM, because they're gods, it's going to ascend to the level of murdering each other and
Yeah.
being born because of the exaggeration of being gods, and because like, or how else would it be god level? Okay, but that's separate from the. So even if you said, okay, like in reality, consenting adults can't go that far, even if that was your position, it's irrelevant to the question of what's healthy for the reader and what's healthy for the writer, because those are still the real people involved. Because this is similar to the Omni paradoxes with the positive God. It's like, yeah, God's paradoxical, but it's besides the point whether he's logically possible. The question is he a good role model?
Right. I understand what you mean. It's the social impact.
And if these gods are not good role models, how do you set it up such that the reader is not relating to them in that way?
Well, there is a control character, and
okay, we're going to get at, because I think you need that. Now, I don't know. I'm wondering why you didn't tell me this at the beginning. But
well, I actually I wanted to, because you mentioned sometimes you have to do like bad things for good reasons, or like if you do something bad it has like a good effect, like that type of thing. Well, there's a character, and he's kind of the main character, but he's like co-main character, co-star, with like the head demon. And so Big Brother Demon is essentially protecting this innocent human, because all his little demon siblings want to kill him for points, because for some reason they've determined that this regular human, like kid or whatever, would give them the most points to kill. So head demon, like leader of the lion pack, is like, no, that's fucking my kill. All you guys can fuck off. So he's a tiger protecting his prey from hyenas. So there's this air of like, oh, he cares about him, and this kid's innocent, and he's going along, and he's kind of learning about the demon and their culture as he goes along with him, as he's being protected by this, like, the Rick of the story, And it's like, it's fun and it's exciting and it's cool as fuck. But then you're getting this contrast for what this kid, an innocent, neutral child, like, way, like an eyes of a child, like, what do they really think about, like, what this ultra god demon, like, crazy person is doing when he, like, is doing, like, squad poses in front of, like, dismembered bodies, because, like, that's the way to style on them.
And what does a child think of that?
Hard to say. What do you think? Nature versus nurture? I'm not entirely sure. It's slow.
Is this the key point?
Well, I think the child would, ideally, what I'd like to happen, because this story, it feels separate from me. The characters, they feel separate from me. They interact and I observe, and I record it. So what I'd like to happen is that I'm not fucking crazy. I know that like they're not literally separate. You know what I mean? But what I would like to weave together in a cohesive way would be that the child would learn from this demon and would go on his own hero's journey after the fact and learn to use the teachings in a constructive way. And that's something that I'm doing personally, so that's where my kind of self-insert begins. But first, I want to tell a story that I'm interested in just for fun.
I think you can load that. Like for instance, I think somebody should. There's a lot of thinkers who have some bad ideas that people should study logic carefully before they delve into really bad ideas, so that they have a better way to resist it. I mean, I think the idea should
That's very Jordan Peterson.
Well, I think that it's funny because I was bothering to not mention him because he's an example of you should learn to reason carefully before you get too deep into his work, because he's absolutely wrong about a few things, and definitely can learn from pushing against it because all this other stuff is useful. And there's a couple main. Well, see, one of the things he's really off about is his approach to power, and it's kind of an authoritarian approach. But anyway,
Yeah.
this maybe might relate to this a bit more, but I kind of think it doesn't so much. But the point being that you want to inoculate yourself before you go into an environment where you have to, battle with something that's a little darker. And I think a few of his mistakes you have to actually battle with. But like it or not, his influence means it's probably helpful to understand what the hell's going on there. But
I'm quite familiar with Jordan.
Like for instance, this kind of comic book, I think that you would want to front load the tools, or you indulge the pornographic side of the violence.
Well, what if it is just porn? What's wrong with porn?
Well, you tell me. What's wrong with porn?
There's a few things. If there's a level of desensitization due to potency, there's commodification of intimacy, there's subjectification of women, there's like actual like access and like the biological influence that has. Like it's so fucking shit. But people should be able to have it because it's fun as fuck. You can use it sometimes.
I mean, I'm not having regulation, but I mean, like, what is bad about porn today? What sense is it bad for X-rated material to be more pornographic? Like, I don't mean you have to first footage of puppies or something, but like, if there's no context, especially for people who are like forming their sexuality, if there's no context, you're lacking some interpretive skills, I guess, because like I don't know, it's like these people like each other. Why do they like each other? Because of the way they look, or is it because of the conversation they had? Well, did you see the conversation?
Right.
What was in it? Like
porn for the story.
No, I'm not really. I mean more so like sex for a reason.
Why? Do you smoke weed for a reason every time?
I hope so. I mean, it's better when I do.
But like explicitly, or is it more just kind of like in the back of your mind?
Well, I'll often smoke right before I'm about to play piano, for instance. It might depend on the time of day. I mean, sometimes it'll be for a specific purpose.
Right. So if you have sex with someone just because they look good or they satisfy some fucking like Freudian like inadequacy, I don't know, then like I don't think that's much of an issue.
Really?
Well, not cosmically, no. Like maybe on the first level, like sociologically, yeah.
At the very least, if you don't know why you're actually doing it, that's a problem.
But don't you think you need to engage in things in order to learn?
Well, if people are on the same page, that's better. And if both people are like, we want to have a learning experience together, and for instance, there's an understanding of like what level of commitment does that involve? Like a study buddy is not the same study buddy is not the level of commitment you need to raise a family and to, like, to commit to each other's long-term development. You're not learning about commitment to long-term development if you don't make a commitment to long-term development, right?
Right, but what if that's not what you're learning? What if you're learning about, well, what if you're learning about like
Well, you're going to
confidence?
go through long-term development, and like it's a more so a question of how it happens. But I'm not saying there should be no casual relationships, but it's not as though there's no risk in casualness.
Oh, and
That,
that's okay. People should be able to do things that are dangerous.
I think it's a mistake to think like, oh well, casual sex is the emotionally safest sex or something like that.
No.
I think that's what some people think. They're protecting themselves.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, but it's
not.
illusory.
because they're running the risk of not entering into enough long-term development.
Yeah.
It's
And
an
what
opportunity.
about the biological components of sex? Like the bonding aspects?
Sorry?
What about like the bonding aspects of sex?
What about them?
Well, do you think that they have like a huge impact if you have a lot of recreational sex? Do you think it like distorts your kind of like inherent view of relationships and sexuality? Like after your brain just gets kind of like fried by like that type of chemistry?
Well, I mean, it's going to sound crude, but it's because it's a hard question to answer, so I can't say that much about it. But one thing we can say is that it makes a difference how many people you're having sex with, because can you get obsessed? Like it's hard to fall in love with a lot of people simultaneously, and it's hard to get over your head with a lot of people simultaneously. I think because there's a certain minimum amount of time to get wrapped up in someone's psyche. I think.
But that's where
And it
something
has
like polyamory would come in. Like it would be like safer for your relationships to have more of like to be able to like decompress with other people.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, that's you should never have such a reductive reason for dating anybody. Like it should be about the person.
Well, no, I don't think it'd be that solely. But would that not be an aspect?
Okay, yeah. I don't think you should use another relationship as a substitute for communicating with the expectations of another relationship.
Can communication have the same decompressive effect as like physical intimacy?
Always. I mean, exact equality isn't what we're talking about here. I mean, you can make it work. I mean, it's not going to kill you. I mean,
That's true. It depends on what you care about.
it's a. I mean, look, take this like notion of like avoiding getting too attached. I don't know. It's an unfortunate thing to be a primary consideration in dating. I think the question should be where can people make a long-term investment? This isn't to say this isn't to say you shouldn't have any deliberately casual relationships or anything like that. But look, it's the long-term investment is the hard part. So like you might as well start working on it. I'm saying like
That's true. It doesn't
all
only
that,
get
I mean-
better, but it only gets more refined, hopefully.
yeah.
There was something I was gonna fucking ask, and then I literally started smoking again, and I forgot. I got too hyped on the polyamory. Okay, so I do want to ask a more general question then, because I don't actively practice polyamory, but I do, forgive me, because I know that my terminology is not sufficient.
It's all in flux. It's still political and in flux. All these definitions.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I've only had monogamous relationships. My last relationship was monogamous. That was like about a year ago. And then it's just been like casual interactions, which I don't actually like think are fulfilling or like super like want to engage in very much. But polyamory, it's something that I've thought about a lot for a long time, even while I was in my monogamous relationship. And a lot of that came from always suffering from like severe jealousy. And
Oh,
that's what basically like ruined my last relationship, is that jealousy, and it just changed me. It's a demon, and it ate me and I died, and I was someone else. And so I thought about it more and more and more, and now I've kind of come to terms, like I've figured a lot of stuff out when it comes to my position in the relationship, and like how it, like my whole role in the decline and blah blah blah, and what was going on with myself. And I've kind of been really good with ghost busting in that area.
Oh, not ghosting busting. I want the superheroes of ghosting busters who are like, we ain't afraid of no ghosters. We're gonna get them to talk about things about their own demons.
That's a whole other level. But yeah, I've been good at tackling that, and I feel very open to polyamory just because I have more of an appreciation for people on a personal level. When it comes to my willingness to be vulnerable with them, like my reasons why have changed. So I think I didn't have a reason before, and so it would just manifest as like selfish things. So it would be like, whether it be I wanted sex, or like with my girlfriend, like being very manipulative in that way, wanting to like have a relationship with someone, like not just intimate, like whether it be friends or whatever, have a relationship with someone because they're untouchable in like a friend group or what have you. But I've
Status motivation.
Yeah. And a lot of it isn't even because of like external witnesses. It's all personal. Again, it's just to be the strongest demon, you know? It's like just that type of dumb shit. And that aspect,
That's one-dimensional, right?
very. It hits a wall so fast, so it's not worth it. What is worth it though is applying the kind of demonic artistic mindset towards the appreciation for people's idiosyncrasies. So, and in order to get there, you have to deconstruct it with sweetness. So you have to be able to manifest sweetness and power. And I think that is a very Christ-like way to be.
I mean, sweetness might not be the exact word, but you know.
Yeah, like just, kindness, a genuine interest, because most people don't actually give a fuck. Like, if you're like, hey, I had a dream last night, oh shit, that's the worst conversation.
A lot of people who don't listen very well, or
Definitely.
Well, it takes work for everybody.
Self-obsession, and I'm young as fuck, so I think it's because I'm just around young people. They're my peers, and I've never gotten along with young people as well as I have with older people.
Young people who have Instagram accounts, their attention span is 0.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to be very high and mighty about that because I used to be pretty good with my social media and my social media presence, but because of like COVID, obviously, and I've been going through some certain things that my will has been breaking down, but I'm trying to get a handle on it.
I was going to say that, like, you're talking about, like, is a one-dimensional thing of just trying to maximize. I still don't know why you weren't trying to maximize the other direction, but it's still one-dimensional anyway. I mean, the real question is, like, which demon do you summon for which situation? And even in less, like, daimonic terms, you can just talk about emotions and how fitted an emotion is to the situation. But, like, someone who's happy all the time is a bad person because they're going to be happy when you, like, kill a small child in front of them. They'd be like, I'm still happy.
Yep.
It's the best of the new kind anyway. So, like, that's not good. And someone who's angry all the time, that's not good either because they're going to be angry when you do something good.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be punishing you for what's actually good behavior.
I think the best way to go about it, if you want like some kind of like social demonic power or presence, is leading by example but using a heavy amount of stoicism. So having virtues, like even just general virtues, like things that everyone can admire, they have to be admirable. Being fit, doing well in school, like, being a productive, well-meaning person, donating to homeless people when you pass them on the street, like, having that kind of way about you. And here's the thing, to everyone that knows me, I mean it when I do those things. Like, it's all circumstance. I'm not actively trying to fucking like manipulate people, but it's observing my actions and the way they've affected people that I've been able to kind of capitalize on them more. And the way to sustain the public eye while not engaging in the acts that increase your status is stoicism. That's how you retain your position.
I want to go. I mean, I don't know necessarily why you want to pursue that goal in the first place.
Well, I
because
did. I don't
hours
really
on-
want to anymore. And the thing is, no. You misunderstand. I would want to, like, I would try to flex it as hard as I could, but this is my genuine way of being. I hate fake shit, and I'm very genuine in the way I am, I find. And it's what I say now, the way I talk with such certainty, like with this type of like wisdom, is that it's just from observing the way my actions have affected the people around me, not necessarily that I force them. But in certain situations, again, it's like getting the powers of a demon. It's being able to flex them when it's convenient.
But there's so many different. Look, let's get polytheistic about this.
Nice.
There are so many possible demons. Right? There's just like there's so many possible gods, which raises problems for Pascal's wager, right? I mean, except that in Pascal's case, there was really only one club he could join that was anywhere within walking distance. But for him, he felt that the only way to make yourself believe something was to join a community and engage in the practices. And he wasn't considering like traveling to another part of the globe in that context. So for him, there really were two columns in the decision matrix for Pascal's wager, but. When you're just talking about all different ways that you can map a demon or a god onto your psyche, there's one for every imaginable sub-process, and you can think of different demons as maximizing certain things. And so you're talking about maximizing a certain kind of dark energy.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think what you need to paint with all the colors of the wind, so to speak, and
that's actually quite a theme in my story.
Paint with all the demons of the wind. And I would say that, for instance, when I was mentioning the positive attributes of the Christian God, one way you could think of it is all liberating, because to be liberating, to confer freedom on others or not take it from them, is almost being equally good, I would think. And so you could imagine the God as being all liberating, which is so maybe why he gave humans free will, and that myth, even though it seems to be incompatible with his all-knowingness, but that's once the ideal reaches the extreme. That's when it becomes a paradox. But as a person, you can try to be as uncontrolling as possible. It's possible to take the least controlling approach imaginable to a situation. And you might say, oh, well, how is that going to work when other people are trying to be controlling? Well, people might tire of that strategy in the longer term. If other people, because guess what? Controlling relationships, I mean, the problem, of course, is when it gets so bad that people are like dangerous in a deeper way, in the psychology of being controlling. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I saw enough dark shit growing up in reality to be like, okay, I don't think I need to. Like, I don't know. I was allowed to watch horror movies and everything, but
I've grown up in darkness. Like if you want to have a dark off.
Well, no, it's not a competition, and that's also one-dimensional. But
no, I know, but it's fun to engage in. It's fun to engage in regardless. It's play.
Okay, but I'm saying, well, what's even more playful, and what more importantly is a kind of play that transfers better to reality, I think, is an effort to increase the number of dimensions of play. So you
wait, hold on. You don't think that engaging in some sort of like playful exchange of trauma isn't like a productive multi-dimensional practice?
I'm saying the play of the fiction of it seems like these gods, the way you're presenting it to me, I feel like the gods, you have this notion of the depth. You even make these spatial modes that there's like this sort of trip downward. Have you seen Jacob's Ladder?
Yes, but I didn't get the whole like thing from like I know it's there, but It's so shameful for me to say, but no, I didn't get it from it.
Well, there's the one part where they talk about the drug creating that descent into intense aggression. That they discovered that it's a theoretical drug.
Yeah.
Takes people, call it the base anger, straight down the ladder. And I feel like you're describing that ladder that you're describing there. I'm just like, how do you get straight to that thing?
Well, yeah, it's literally just manifesting derangedness.
But there's two things here, broad things, and I want you to keep these two things in mind as like overarching over all of this, because one of them is that in general, you want to aim before you fire. Stronger emotions require better aim. And so if you're exploring extremes, I would explore a larger number of directions first, because that allows you to actually aim the gun. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I've explored them in my own life. Like, I don't really care to explore them narratively.
Well,
because that's not the point.
Anyone's really explored how much. Well, you were just telling me that you haven't actually explored polyamory in your own life.
Well, that's just one extreme that I haven't explored. Like, I've explored it to some some magnitude, just inner, like on the inside, but I haven't had an opportunity to actually act on it. No, but there is some level of work in there. I do admire the extreme. Like, I am working towards that level, but that's not the only point. Like, that's not the only point on my fucking skill tree.
Like, I mean, I guess you have an enthusiasm for this dark direction that I don't share as much, and I mean, you're asking me for feedback, and I'm telling you, like, I don't know, to me, I would
no, that's fine. I don't expect most people to feel it, and that's part of why I'm making it.
I'm not against exploring the psyche or anything like that. I mean, like, I don't know, criminologists have to understand murders, and I don't know, but like,
oh, I would so love to be one.
But I'm saying, to be a criminologist.
Yeah, no, not a murderer. Yeah, a criminologist.
Yeah, I mean, is there something stopping you from becoming a criminologist?
Yeah, my academic performance.
Just get to finish this comic book first. Become a criminologist.
Basically.
Okay. Well, at any rate, if you're going to be a criminologist and study like how many dimensions of human emotion are involved in a crime, it's not just
probably
one emotion, two.
Yeah, of course. I'm not dim.
Okay. Fair enough, sir. But
sorry. I don't mean to get aggressive.
All right, but I think it's a little glib to be like, oh, well, I've explored all this stuff. I don't think our culture has explored that much notion of being of taking the least controlling approach one can imagine to something, because it involves exercising your imagination first. That's what I'm getting at. And so what fiction exercises people's imagination. I mean, like Northrop Frye's Massey lectures were called The Educated Imagination, and his argument there is that the function of literature is to educate your imagination. And the question is, well, one question is, where does our collective education, where does our collective imagination need more education? I feel that our collective imagination does not need more education about these dark places. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, and maybe I'll learn something from a comic book, but I'm saying I feel our collective imagination needs more education when it comes to, or more exercise, when it comes to imagining extremely non-controlling approaches. Because people have a hard time imagining it. But it's often due to an unwillingness to exercise their imagination also on the collective level, because there aren't a lot of popular stories that exercise one's imagination in that way.
See, here's the thing. That's what you say popular stories, but there are lots of content exhibiting that. I would just say it's mostly misinterpreted. So that's why you're not seeing it exhibited as much in society. That's more of that's more of an issue with the collective unconscious rather than the actual content that's produced in the society. Whereas mine would be more like mine's more like what?
An analogy to exercising at a gym, and the notion that like some guys will only work their upper body.
Mm-hmm.
they're fixated on a narrow set of goals.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the same thing with your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like I'm standing. Seems like you already have more exercise than a usual person in that direction. Now, that doesn't mean that's not useful for one's art. But I think as a countermeasure, I would go into something like this saying, hey, if I'm feeling pulled in a hazardous direction aesthetically, because I'm a sick fascination, I need to understand something about the human mind or something like that. What's going to be the counterweight?
Well,
And
do you want to talk about love and beauty? Because we can do that. I'm quite fanatical about that as well.
Freedom.
Oh, okay. So you have a very distinct position against controlling themes.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my problem with that. It's so general.
I'm not hearing in your exploration of the psyche any caution or fear or worry or concern about the controlling aspects of the human psyche. I'm not hearing that you're concerned about what you indulge, and I think that's before you indulge something, you should first be concerned about what you indulge, at least so you make a good choice about what to indulge, for how long, and in what context, and at what point in the story, and what tools are ready to the reader.
Right. So you think that I should have a more conscious perspective on what position my story is taking in terms of the context of society.
Yeah, and I think that about people's relationships and everything overall. I think people don't consider the political. I think about software as well. Like I've often said that a lot of programmers don't have enough political context in what they're writing as programmers. I think about everything, that people absolutely do not take enough political context in almost anything they do.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of get it in like our purchasing habits. There's something really direct about like, oh, okay, like my purchases led to this much carbon or whatever. But like, it's literally every action.
Okay.
Our society is built in how it is, and yeah.
This kind of goes into what we were talking about before, like at the beginning, which was like, do you think that there are symbols that are so fundamental to the human condition that they can be applied to anything, regardless of the theme that they're presented through? So like,
Completely.
So say you take the symbol of demons, very very generic, very kind of easy to deconstruct. Do you think that demons, that symbol, will come through, like it'll resonate it'll be interpretable in the same way, regardless of what story it's put in, regardless of what narrative it's presented through?
It makes some difference. I mean, I'm not sure what the upshot of answering this question one way or the other.
Okay,
is. I mean,
so what if my story, instead of demons, it was angels? And these angels were like, we have to save the world by committing these unholy acts. Then what?
Well, there's a more obvious moral to take from that story in that case.
From what context?
That you can do evil by being blinded by thinking that you're angelic.
Okay, so but is the idea that you can do good with the intention of being evil not as valuable? Because you see that a lot in the political sphere.
Well, it's not. That's also not what's happening in the story you described.
Yeah, it is, because the master demon is protecting the innocent boy, only to kill him on his own terms. You'll see that a lot in public political discourse.
I don't know. I mean, there's what themes you explore and how you explore them, and I just, I think it's yeah. I mean, you summarize it yourself. I'm saying you got to consider the political dimension. What is the political effect of a work of art? That's what I think. I mean,
I will admit that one of my greatest shortcomings is my general disinterest in like society, politics, that type of thing. So I do agree that my story doesn't actually have like a focus on helping the current like humanitarian position in like Western society. And on an artistic level, on a disconnected level, which I would say is more genuine for me, is disconnected and more oblivious to society. Not its shortcomings, but more so its, I don't know, the names of everything per se. Anyway, I get it, but from a disconnected artist perspective, it's, again, I'm obsessed. I can't help it. It's a demon, and I admit it. Like, I know. And I try to do what I can through it by applying the symbols that I know. And again, it's gonna sound so cringe. Please, for the love of God, don't crucify me. I really think that anime helps a lot with that, because they present demonic themes in productive ways. The difference there is they're heroes. They're hero stories. They're not villain stories. Whereas mine would be more of a villain story.
Yeah, maybe that's not. I'm not getting that you were trying to. Yeah, maybe I'm not prepared to like comment constructively on a villain story. I don't know.
There are lots of villain stories. They just involve redemption or some sort of like moral gray area. Whereas mine is just kind of like, I don't know, maybe you are a fucking demon. You don't even know it because it just looks so goddamn good. Silence on the hills.
I'm not sure where you were going with that.
Oh, it's just like anything, like, okay, the same way there are, like, if like the purpose of art or media is like, this is what to do, there's also should be a bunch of this is what not to do in terms of like a moralist.
It doesn't have to be that heavy-handed. I mean, like, you can leave it open to interpretation to a degree. You have to present. Look, you can have your opinion, and you can think, well, I want my reader to be able to reach a different opinion. At least I want them to have the tools to at least them to be able to check my opinion.
Right.
That is like scientific replication. I think you want the reader to be able to double check you.
So here's the thing. Someone in the chat, is this story in a similar realm to The Joker? So I guess that's a good question. What do you think about the new cinematic Joker movie then? I haven't seen it. Don't fucking spoil it.
I haven't seen it either. I've seen just the Joker in the Batman context.
I was gonna go see it, but then I thought going to see it on my own was kind of a red flag.
Oh, see, so it's funny. So you've gone from Batman to the Joker, and I went from Batman to Superman. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We didn't linger on that point earlier, but I converted from Batman to Superman in like grade something. Batman was my favorite superhero. Superman was my favorite superhero, and it was when Superman died, and there was a lot of media blitz around Superman. But nonetheless, I found it more interesting in the long run.
So here's the thing: if you want to get more personal and get a little less symbolic, I didn't give a fuck about Superman or Batman, and I loved Naruto. Like, that he was my Superman.
Okay, this is how we lost the comparison before. So, what the difference? So Batman is fucked up, right? He was Batman is processing childhood trauma.
Yeah,
like so many of us. And well, yeah, I mean, he might remember. He might have been traumatized by the apocalypse of his homeworld or whatever. But like, he had a very stable upbringing.
Yep.
Bruce Wayne was well off and all that, but he was just spent his whole childhood being like, I'm gonna get vengeance on like every symbol of the criminals who killed my parents. And Superman has none of that in his psychology. He has a lot more responsibility than Batman. He has a lot more power.
Okay, and yet, wait, hold on. And yet, consciously, there are many items within the DC universe that Batman has used that take godlike amounts of like conscious energy and like acceptance of self. So Batman's trauma is not the key motivating factor to his actions.
Well, imagine the cases where he's not using these objects. What do you mean, like?
Well,
like
it's just to say,
Green
like Batman has the soundest conscience, and psyche out of everyone in the Justice League, regardless of the fact that he's probably the most fucked.
You read Arkham Asylum?
I haven't read it. I played the game.
Oh, no, it's a graphic novel with oil paintings. With Batman gets stuck in Arkham Asylum, locked inside Arkham Asylum, and has to deal with all the people that he put away there. And the theme of the whole novel is that all of his crazy nemesis try to convince him that he's fucked up. They're like, no, you've been committed here. Like, you're crazy.
Okay, you know what I just did here? I'm sorry. I fucking totally did a fucking Redditor nerd moment and did a actually when you were trying to explain something way more important. So I'm sorry.
Sorry, but I'm saying Batman goes into Arkham Asylum. I forgot the premise of how he gets locked in there, but basically everyone tries to convince him that he's just as crazy as them.
Yeah, that's kind of like his main.
Well, you're operating.
I guess so. It is very jokery, where I am just kind of trying to show everyone that they're just a bunch of murderous demons, maybe. In like a
So
weird
what happens
way.
if you take Superman and the Joker?
Ooh, Superman killed the Joker once. He just did it. He didn't have the moral standing that Batman did. He just straight up killed him immediately. There's this beautiful, famous panel of Superman with his arm through the Joker.
So Superman has other issues of like what to do with the weight of the power that he has.
More utilitarian.
Yeah, he's like in a utilitarian nightmare, basically.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, everything I have to do every day to maximize utility is like a major pain in the ass.
He's got to sit in the sun.
All sorts of shit because no one else can do it. No, the broad point I'm making is that if whenever you're pulled so strongly in that direction, you should figure out what's going on, and that might be aesthetically. You absolutely should look for additional directions. Here's a completely different example. Children shouldn't believe things that all of the adults agree on. Believe the things that they've found adults who disagree on, where they figured out which adult was more right.
Yeah, use your fucking frontal lobe.
Well, it's not just a matter of frontal lobe. It's a matter you have to actually. It's a social network problem because if you're born in an echo chamber, you're not going to have a justification for believing what you believe until you meet people who believe the opposite.
There's a whole psychic reprogramming.
You're going to understand the actual difference between really believing it and not believing it. You never meet the people who disagree with your central tenets. You're not going to get it. Why do they disagree then? You have different. So
okay, go.
You always want. I think it maximizes. Speaking of freedom, I think it maximizes. So I guess what I'm talking about is maximizing your freedom, because I think it maximizes freedom to have contradictory sources. Then you're starting to choose for yourself. All of your advisors agree and conspire with one another and act like they're independent sources converging when they're actually just a conspiracy. You have an illusion of freedom. You think, oh, well, like I'm getting information from different sources and it's converging on this thing. And
wink, wink. I don't know. It seems kind of pertinent.
Distributed worm tongue, like in Lord of the Rings, like just poisoned by your advisors, or in Chinese chess, the king's often smothered because the advisors are still alive. It's often beneficial for the king's survival for the advisors to die. Chinese chess.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a little political commentary inside that version of the chess.
Art imitates life. The games look like life.
Yeah, but anyway, so I think it's for instance, I think you would have more freedom if you spent more time thinking about demons contrary to the ones that obsess you.
Well, that would be angels.
I don't mean contrary along a single axis.
Ooh.
I mean, suppose there's 3 dimensions or more in space, and one demon is going like, north, south, west, or whatever.
Okay, so wait, hold on. I kind of know where you're going with this.
There's a demon that goes this way and a demon that goes this way.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you have them all pulling different directions, then you actually are like sort of steering emotionally, and then you can try to find a center. Like when you
when you meditate and you try to find your center
Mm-hmm.
and you balance of like going right, going left like this, and like forward, backward. To do that with your demons is what I would suggest, because what I'm detecting is I'm not against any exploration in particular, but I'm sensing like a strong imbalance.
Okay, hold on. This is where your senses deceive you, because
Okay.
and
But hold on.
it's not your fault.
Second, but first, you agree with the general principle.
Yeah, no, I totally do, because there has to be that sense of variety for there to be any sort of stability, and it has to be done properly, obviously. But and this is gonna sound so lame, and I'm so sorry, but you need to watch more anime, because
Send me a viewing list. I'll check some of them.
oh, I definitely will. And here, so remember I was describing like those epics in anime, like how they're kind of hard to digest. Well, a common theme is there is an organization, and within this organization, they would operate and look very similar to what my like sibling demons would look like, right? They would operate in the world in this way, but they'd be connected in some shadowy, sinister way. But when they fight a character that contrasts them, there's a philosophy that's built into them that is like entails why they're a part of this organization, and then the character fighting them is usually some kind of foil to that. So then, and whichever philosophy is actually better is the character that usually wins. So the what I'm trying to say is that there's always a cast of characters that are very similar, but the key differences in their powers and their move set is what describes their philosophy. So if one person is like ice shield impenetrable barrier and the other person's like petal blossom infinite sword, it's like you're seeing an unstoppable force and an immovable object, and those are the philosophies that are clashing.
This mythic landscape, this like mythic metric space or whatever, how do you have play out? How plays out the difference between who's win and who should win?
In my personal story,
In this comic book, how would the reader receive any kind of moral education from the text in the difference? Like when somebody wins in this story, can they tell if that's who should have won?
well, yes, because of the idea of hard, unmoving virtues being laws of the universe. So the hard, unmoving virtues being that if you are more savage but more equipped to use your savagery effectively, then you win because you'll get more points. And in order to get more points, the other person has to die, basically, because it's all just like that's just how the rules work. So in order to win, you have to be
You're
stronger.
These gods are sort of possessed by aesthetics, and so basically for them, all of their other values became kind of arbitrary because they got subsumed under aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'm getting, and which means that this moral compass. The bottom line I'm getting here is where's the moral compass? How are you building it? How are you maintaining it? If you're about to go through treacherous terrain, waters, you need a compass.
Okay, so here's the thing. You're watching it. You're watching it through the eyes of an innocent kid. So it's slowly being revealed what the actual nature of these demons is through observing the interactions of the highest level demon going through and basically murdering all his siblings through the levels. So when he meets someone who like embodies like the gangster aesthetic, and it's like, I'm a hard gangster and I fucking kill people in the streets and I sling drugs and blah 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 blah, like whatever kind of like caricature, stereotype, what have you, to show some sort of like predatory way of being, there's discourse within the interaction between the confident higher demon who's enigmatic, deconstructing the flaws of his siblings and as to why they're kind of goofy more so, and then that's just exemplified through the actual choreography, through the actual like if I was to sit here and just destroy you and like insult you in these ways that actually hurt you, what would that look like if they were fighting?
Does the child who's exposed to the demons develop throughout the course of the story? Does their age go up?
Yeah, so there's time skips. So here's the thing. Here's what I want you to understand. When I talk about this story, okay, this story is the story of the demon siblings who are the most powerful in the verse, and they are obsessed with aesthetics and violence, essentially. Okay, so that's the base theme. Everything has to go back to that. But within the world, the lore that I'm creating, I do want multiple stories, but for this comic, the themes can't overlap too much. So say I want the theme of the kid's sequel series story as he develops to be a reconciliation of what it was like to be brought up by a demon and now have all these powers that he can't control. That's a very typical shonen anime, shonen just being like where all the cliches tend to come from. That's a very typical anime theme that I could totally explore and go through in like that hero's journey kind of way.
The basic thing I want to suggest here is that set it up with the demons driven by aesthetics. So there's almost the question implicit in that is a kind of aesthetic relativism or a nihilism through prioritizing aesthetics. So, but I think you need to have something which is the voice against the nihilism. And that's not going to come from the child necessarily. If anything, it could come. On the one hand, I was imagining you could have other beings to personify some more objective value that judge the aesthetic relativist gods or something in some way, or it could be in the discourse where maybe two gods do the same thing but in different contexts, and some other characters have a disagreement about whether it makes an important difference or not.
I see.
Yeah.
That actually does make a lot of sense. And I've been exploring this idea that I'm not sure if I was going to use, but I was thinking of, so like these are all sibling demons, and there would be the top dog, like the one who's like with the kid, he's the big brother, but who's the daddy? And it's like, so you have like the one daddy, he's just shrouded in darkness, like his character design is literally just like a fucking like whirling shadow, and the kid is the one who finally confronts him. The siblings never talk to him, and the kid is the one who confronts him. And the kid would find out that this leader figure, knew that these beings existed and that they would pine after this like cosmic point system, that he knew that they would become deranged. So he sage-like took them in as children and like taught them these demonic ways in order to have some sort of like sophistication, so they don't just blow up universe after universe just like haphazardly. There's like a game being played, there are rules in place, and if there weren't, they would be unstoppable, like just Cthulhu level forces of nature.
I would emphasize that angle, because I think basically you want there to be a question of moral development. You want it to be a question that the text prompts the author to ask, not that you necessarily force an answer upon them, but you want to make sure that, I would say that you want to guide, not necessarily specific question. You want it, look, if your reader is in gratification from pornographic violence, they're not prompted to ask any questions about moral development, and you are probably leading them in a bad direction. That's what I'm thinking.
Right. Okay, I agree. And here's the thing though about my I don't know, my amendment, like my having this daddy figure that like puts on this persona of darkness in order to keep all these hyenas in check, basically. If that's the case, then that doesn't detract from his teachings. If he's teaching them like vampirism, basically like how to channel evil into like an aesthetic sexiness, and like that's how you have control over it, like that's still promoting at least that as good, and reaffirming what they already knew, which is that just being some kind of monstrous animal is bad. Like, that's what's bad. If you're gonna murder, do it like Jigsaw in like the Saw series, like do it with art, you know, like that type of shit.
Well, that could be a perverse incentive.
Exactly. So it's a hard, but like if you met a deranged psychopath, like you can't argue with them.
So I think I kind of got the main point across that I was trying to make in response to what you're presenting here. Do you feel like I answered the question that you're asking me?
I don't even know what I asked you. I just wanted your general view.
Yeah, I forget. Well, I forget it was something about. So, I mean, I feel
No,
like
honestly, you've given me a lot to think about, and I feel like I've been stuck a lot in my storytelling, and like a car in mud, and you've just given me like a bit of a push. So I appreciate that.
Because the other way to put the concept of imbalance is the idea of like an emotional cramp. Like, for instance, I've often made the critique of heavy metal, not that all albums like this, but often as a genre, I feel that it's slightly emotionally cramped and that it must not show weakness. Tough all the time.
Oh, Lord have mercy. You did not, sir.
Like metal. And I think some of the best metal has those moments.
I'll send you some that I think you're going to love, honestly.
Good. I mean, the opening, one of my favorite metal albums is Dimmu Borgir, Puritanical Euphoric Misanthropia.
Oh, I've heard it. Yeah.
The opening is a string orchestra. And, I mean, there's some pathos and for that reason, vulnerability in that. And
do you read the lyrics while you listen to metal, or do you just let the vocals be their own instrument?
No, I'm not much of a lyrics person at all.
Really? Do you prefer music over movies? I would assume yes.
Usually.
So, yeah, so you're more of like an audio than a visual person? Because I like lyrics because they give something to audio learners, or visual learners, because it lets you, well, visualize what the music wants to say. And I value both, honestly. I like sometimes when the lyrics don't get in the way of what the music is saying, because sometimes artists create things they don't even know what they made, I think. They create things like music that's just, it says so many like fundamental truths that I don't even think they tried to do. Which is why I hate when people say, it's not that deep, they didn't try to do that. And it's like, I don't care. If I accidentally make the most delicious meal ever, are you just going to not eat it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not. See, those people are stuck in social comparison rather than in trying to get, I don't know, convey information. I mean, they're not first trying to empathize. They're first trying to come up with a way to be like, that's not very good.
Yeah.
The dark existence, I would say.
Darker than my own demons, I would say, in my story. At least they have fun.
Well, no, the story demons, yeah.
At least there's sweetness between them.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at about 2.5 hours. Honestly, I'm having a great time. And here, I'll take this moment to just amp you up a little bit, because you might not you might not understand it, and sometimes I feel like I'm kind of annoying towards you, but to me, you're kind of like a celebrity, more so than like any other like actual famous celebrity, because a lot of the time, like, I spent so much time wandering the city as a degenerate, like just looking for something, I don't fucking know, just thinking about my story, not going to school, and like, you embody, you are a community leader, and the community that you lead is very artistic, and in Toronto specifically, it's so valuable and important because there's an infection that's just like eating all the culture and artistry from Toronto, and there is a resistance. You know, you're getting some like severe pushback, but I mean,
well, unfortunately, I'm going to push back against this framing in a similar way to the way I pushed against the framing of your story. Well, slightly not that similar, but in a sense, we need more leaders. We need there need to be less. We need there to be less of a difference between organizer and organizee. We need to decentralize events in general. So, you know, one of the things that I think is good about COVID, the silver linings, is that events can't be big. So we can't do protests, but guess what? They didn't work anyway. What works is building up from smaller scale organization to larger scale organization, something that does do things on a sustainable scale, not just shouting about a problem, like maybe to help it, but like you can hear this from many quarters. You can look at Richard Wolff or Chomsky, you're going to be talking about there's not enough organization on the left, and it requires daily work, and it requires different people to be in charge, because it's always the same people in charge. It ends up reflecting their interests accidentally, even if they try against that. It'll happen accidentally because or it'll just be some other kind of bias that's not maybe their interest, but it's just like their style.
Yeah.
Ends up having too much weight. I'm never going to be quieter, so everyone else needs to be louder. Is what I'm trying to say. I don't think there's. I don't think I've ever done anything in terms of leadership that shouldn't be done by everyone.
Right.
And I think that because events have to be smaller during COVID, it's a great time for people to get practice. When it comes to something like organizing an event, whether it's a social event or a political event, or like trying to get a task done, like online, you're trying to get a small piece of code working or something, any kind of organizing, always easier to start in a smaller problem and then work towards a bigger problem. So if events can't even be bigger than 10 people, well, great. That reduces the power difference between people who are experienced at organizing events, who can more easily organize large events, and people who still need practice. So it's actually a leveler in that way. And also, if you're meeting outdoors, it's less relevant who's got a nice place. I think this is a great time for everyone to get practice organizing small events. And if you, there are very few recurring events that don't have recurring hosts.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think if it were just baked in as a cultural idea that after you have a party, the thing that happens is one of the guests is the host next time.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want the responsibility of hosting, but on a small scale, it's workable.
I love it.
Right?
I love hosting.
I think as you scale these things up, some people are going to tap out and say, like, well, I don't want to organize things that are more than 100 people. And someone says, well, I don't want to organize things that are more than 1,000 people. So I don't want to organize things that are more than 10,000 people. And everyone will have people will tap out at a certain point and be like, I've taken on enough complexity in terms of like the scope of what I'm organizing. But it's a question of exercise. It's not a question of who gets furthest. It's a question of, is everyone getting exercise at organizing?
Right. I want to. Okay, so
don't think who are the leaders. Think who hasn't been a leader recently enough.
This is so funny. See, this is why you're so beautiful, man. Because one time we were at I don't know if it's called The Boat or something in Kensington. Is it in Kensington? The Boat, yeah.
Yeah, The Boat, which shut down tragically. Actually.
Oh, fuck. Okay, I'll mourn that later because that is actually tragic. But I remember one time I was there and then you like just happened to be there. You were doing a show or something like that. Wait, or did you ask?
Open mic.
Yeah.
Probably dope.
And then I was by myself again. I was a fucking degenerate. I'd go to bars and shit all the time by myself. That's a whole past life. But anyway, so you were there and I said hi, whatever, we're talking. And then you were outside smoking with Rosie. So obviously you're just chilling. You're just having a nice time with your fucking wife. You're just smoking weed. And then I come out and I was like gabbing you up. And I'm like, oh yeah, like there's so like you're so deeply ingrained in like the community. And then you just like so begrudgingly just went, well, looks like you're missing some of the community in there. Just try to get me off your back. Oh god, it's fucking heavenly. Honestly, beautiful. Because
that's what I'm saying.
But it's true. It was true. It's like, why would I hang out there with you when I could be in there engaging with the community? Yeah.
The message is one of decentralization.
Yeah. And it's funny that you preach it so much, and yet you magnetize most of the potent artistry of the city as like some kind of nucleus.
Well, I don't know about that. There's a whole lot of artists in the city that you probably never even heard, and you probably don't know who I am.
Well, definitely, but there are these eerie times where I'm on Facebook and I look at my suggested friends. I love scrolling through suggested friends because it's like it's so interesting to see the connections that some people have with mutual friends, and there are just the most random people that I've like barely know from like when I was a kid, and they're friends with you on Facebook, and I'm like, what the fuck? So it's just, I don't know, I love it. Do you still have time? Because I want to ask you about Toronto.
Okay.
How
But
long have you been in Toronto?
by the way, your image is frozen, but I'm still listening.
Yeah, you were
Well, I was
frozen
born
for a
in
little
Toronto. I was born in Toronto, and my father passed when I was a year old, so we moved back to Barrie, which is where my mother grew up, where her parents were. And so, although I was born in Toronto, I grew up in Barrie, and then I came back here for university, and here since, pretty much. Let's see, how long ago was it? So I'm 38 now, and so I started university like a year later than normal when people were taking OIC. So I don't know, you can do the math.
Yeah.
No, I still think in terms of academic years more than my age. But anyway, because then I spent like a decade in school. But I've been in
Oh, wow.
Toronto like roughly 2 decades.
Right. So you've seen roughly like the peak of its culture, would you say? Or like when would you say its peak of culture would be?
Well, I don't know. I was actually more of a shut-in, really focused on academics and just my practicing and everything early on, and then I started branching out into organizing camp. See, I started small, just discussion groups with a couple people, and really focusing on making that good, and make sure people were intrinsically motivated, and not coming for like grades or for the free
Yeah.
whatever. Just, looking for intrinsic motivation. I was like, who actually gives a shit? Because I give a shit, and I don't want to deal with any phony bullshit. You're chasing a degree, like it might be nice to get one, but like I'm here for answers. I didn't get them from the church. I didn't get them from my parents. I didn't get them from the likes of you and just people around. And who isn't in that situation? Honestly, who isn't? Who doesn't have more questions than answers? It's just I feel like some people, but you have to demand answers from yourself and from the world, and the community has to. There's always these unanswered questions. Some of them are very practical, like what the fuck do we do about COVID? And oh my god! And like some of them are more abstract and existentialist or nihilistic type questions. But you get nowhere by giving up. I mean, there are things other than answering questions in life, but like a lot of things you have to do require answering some questions along the way. So.
Oh, for sure. And then but you can get so lost just answering questions, because that's what happened to me. Like I wandered the city for like 5 years. Basically, it's just like this poor, like half vagrant, just wandering around, talking to any interesting person I could find. And I mean, the beauty that I've seen is just ineffable. And I mean, obviously I've seen some, not horror, but things that are sad. And even then I'll still engage with them. Like I've talked to such incredible homeless people, bar owners, like community organizers, like all these types of people. And someone who always sticks out in my mind is Daryl Dorse. He is the owner of the Green Iguana, and he was are you familiar with the Green Iguana?
No, where is it?
It used to be what was it called? It was called there was like it was by Honest Ed's, and there was like a street, and it was called somethingville, but it was where all the artists lived, because Honest Ed like wanted to give them housing and whatever. So Daryl was called mayor of whatever. Mirvish Village. Yes, thank you. He was called mayor of Mirvish Village. He was like the artist daddy. He was the demon daddy. He was and he had people from all over the world come and bring him things, and he would just sell them. because he just knew interesting people, and he worked with specifically glass blowers. So he had these beautiful glass art pieces. He worked out of this house for years and years and years. Typical Toronto like legend, in one place for many years and just super involved with the community and whatever. He was Ed Mirvish's like best friend. He would take Ed's wife out on dates for him like every week and blah 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 blah. And Daryl is just the most beautiful, eccentric man. And you walk in and he seems like you have to break him down a little bit. You have to have a good attitude, but he's so ready to talk. He always just sits in his same spot and he frames pictures like with copper. Like it's like the most like inane, like mediocre thing, and he just sits in the back in front of all this incredible art, and he just does this hard task all day with his fucking fingernails, and it's beautiful, like it's perfect, but it's so simple. And you go up to him like, hey Daryl, like blah blah blah, maybe you know him, maybe you don't, like whatever. He's a bunch of people come in all day and just talk to him. And I went in one day when he still lived in Mirvish Village. He's since moved because it got shut down, so that's why I went to go talk to him, because I saw a post about it. And I was like, who is this guy, mayor of Mirvish Village, back when I wanted to start an artist commune. So I was like, I want to get the skinny, you know? So I went and I just talked to him. He's like, oh yeah, come upstairs. And he's just like, here, have a seat. And he goes, back in the 60s, blah, blah, blah. And it was amazing. The stories he has, like, is so much detail, talking about like Rocheville and Rochdale. And I keep saying Ville, I don't know. Talking about,
what did you say about Rochdale?
Talking about times of like being on LSD and getting like pepper sprayed and shit. Like
Rochdale?
Around, well, that was like in his stories of Rochdale. Apparently he was like doing some kind of protest on the street and they like gassed the place. But anyway, yeah, he's like, yeah, I was on a little bit of acid, you know, and they fucking pepper sprayed us. And so yeah, I'm like, how do you even remember all this? And he just says, looks me right in the eye, I just pay attention. And I'm like, of course it's that. Yeah, of course, that's it. And every now and then I used to pass by, because he's across from Comedy Bar now. And so I used to go there a lot. I tried to make a name in that fucking universe. And then so I would go and I'd visit Daryl. I just walk in, hey Daryl, you probably don't remember me. Every single time. And he'd say, oh, I kind of do, every single time. And then one time, and I'd just talk to him about whatever. One time, I went in asking him, I have this incredible old pocket watch that first time I have so many Toronto stories, I'm sorry, but first time I ever went to Toronto, as a young boy from Mississauga, just like so excited to be in the fucking world, happy to be on the fucking subway. Can you imagine? I got this fucking old stopwatch that was broken, but it's incredible, and apparently like an actual train conductor like used it. And someone that ran like a trinket shop, he was like so hyped for me to like be out in the city. He's like, you can pick something, you can have it. So I picked that. And I've had it with me in my breast pocket of my coat for so many years. And one day I went to Daryl, I'm like, hey, do you know anyone that can like get this fixed for me? And he goes, yeah, I'll give you his phone number. gives me his phone number. I look him up. He's some big boy in the fucking mechanical like watch industry. He's a god, like, you know, he sits there, everything he touches with like with the gentleness of an angel's wing, just like caressing the gears. Like he's one of those motherfuckers. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm not just getting it repaired, I'm gonna get his ass to teach me. I'm gonna get an apprenticeship from a god tier being. And I didn't do it because I ended up moving to Barrie to try and be a fucking law clerk, and then I didn't do that.
Barrie. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Barrie. I can understand how that's a bad ending to the story.
Yeah, I didn't get to be taught like the ancient art of watchmaking and timekeeping from some god tier being that I was personally addressed to.
I forgot.
And he's old, and I don't want him to die. I still have his phone number and his home address. What am I supposed to do with his phone number and home address? Just like show up, be like, Daryl Daryl fucking sent me. I
Well-
fucking love the city, man. I'm so sad it's getting turned to
Maybe
shit.
lessons online.
Hmm?
Well, I hope there'll be a big rejuvenation. I mean, there could be this could be an opportunity for innovation. I've been trying to have brainstorm conversations down there with people with what to do for venues after COVID, because there will be lots of empty storefronts. And I don't know. I mean, in general, I think our society needs more worker managed co-ops. From what I've learned from watching Richard Wolff's videos, which I highly recommend to everyone. Anyone who's, especially if you have literally any negative thoughts about capitalism, just go watch Richard Wolff, because his analysis is just helpful for like framing some things.
Cool, man. That's cool.
And Peterson was afraid to debate him.
Wow. High
You can see the
level.
story of that. Richard Wolff was on Primo Nutmeg. On that episode, he explains how Peterson sort of managed to evade having to debate him.
Cool.
Anyway, yeah, I have a lot more respect for Richard Wolff. Yeah. But at any rate, he's not just saying, "Oh, this is a meritocracy." He's like, "Actually, the system is fucked up. Here's what was also fucked up in the USSR, because they didn't really have worker management for long there either." And he makes a point which I think you can generalize to a lot of things, that like decisions are made by the board of directors at a corporation, and that's a subset. It's a kind of oligarchy, in that over time, if the decisions are made by the few, they will reflect the interests of the few. So, like Facebook, for instance, is designed by a small number of people compared to the number of users.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an asymmetry there. And you notice they aren't doing a poll once a day or even once a month about what features you want, anything like that. They're not giving you an ability to change the features other than some basic settings.
Yeah.
You say, well, that's partly a fraudulent problem, but if they were in their financial interest, they would have solved this problem already, I believe. And not in their interest to democratize power over the system, because that's how they have power over people. The centralized power model. And I've been really thinking of how, like, you could make like the social justice Facebook, that somehow the software is designed to be more just and like distribute attention in a way that avoids like attention wealth inequality or something, or whatever that would be. But if the software beneath the software that the company runs on is the software of a corporation instead of a cooperative, I think you end up getting a lot of the same issues replicating themselves. At the very least, you're still going to have income inequality, even if somehow the social justice Facebook makes sure there isn't too much attention inequality.
Mm-hmm.
If it's still run by a corporation, the corporations are basically causing income inequality compared to what it would be if they were all worker cooperatives. So anyway, in the case of venues in Toronto, I figure why not explore the idea of worker cooperative venues or guest cooperatives, because the alcohol model is a really toxic thing, right? We've all known people who drink too much who are regulars at a spot, and it's like, okay, but like, and anyway, there's a whole story that we've all lived through in one setting or another, and it's like, well, you could have a model where, let's think this is brainstorming. I don't know what I'm doing, but you could have a model where everyone pays a cover charge, but that cover charge doesn't just disappear. It gets you a small percentage of membership in the co-op. And so people who have paid cover every day, let's say that's a lot. People who have paid cover every week for 5 years have a lot of say in a vote about where to relocate the venue, let's say. And people who just showed up in the last month are not going to have as much say because they have paid cover charge fewer times.
I like that idea a lot. As long as there's a way to credit individuals for more abstract contributions.
What do you mean?
Like, say you are, say you can't ever pay cover, so you're like the lowest tier. But then every time there's like a fight or a dispute in the venue, you have some like Jesus-like ability to calm everyone down and make the situation perfect. So you are an important aspect to that facility.
I imagine that would hold sway in the discussions that would lead up to a vote on something.
Yeah, like you should have, I feel like you should have a little more merit.
It's not in the sense of obeying, but in the sense of hearing them out in terms of they think about how to vote on something. Because like if you think like for politics, you listen to some people and not others. Not that you obey them necessarily, but you take in the political opinions more less critically of some sources than others, and
Yeah.
you know,
But let's say like the president or whatever, um, like you need something. Actually, okay, fuck the president metaphor. You need something to give to the homeless person that can calm everyone down, to like exemplify why the powers that be are listening to them. Like you need to be able to demonstrate that to the layman's, so that way they're not just like, hey, why the fuck you listening to this fucking homeless person when I also don't pay cover? I want equal say. It's like no. They have 10 merit points because like like they have these abilities, so we need to listen to them. So you need to have a point.
If you want to push it towards an extreme, I mean, people could vote on whether to take the locks off the doors like they did at Rochdale, which was like being given a next level of chaos. That was not done by vote, though. It was done unilaterally by what's his name? You can see it in the documentary Dream Tower. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but like,
Wait. Sorry. Did you say there's a documentary called Dream Tower about Rochdale?
yeah,
Woo! Okay, I like that.
I think I actually may have mentioned to you once, but yeah, because we talked about Rochdale, I think.
Yeah, because we went there.
Oh yeah, after that event,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of stuff then, but I mean, but the bottom line is like this, like venue co-op has to pay the rent, so like that's what the cover charge is doing, so that the alcohol model isn't so dependent for the. I mean, it could even be BYOB, like venues just are not selling alcohol. I don't know legally in Toronto if you do it. There are venues I've been to in Scotland that are like that. That would be a different business model. There'd be less of a financial disincentive from getting super drunk, but
I would like that, and then a higher cover charge.
Yeah, but BYOB, but there's a cover charge, but the cover charge is buys you weight in votes about what the venue is going to do, like which artist should they book. Ultimately, you want people to show up. So the people who show up, if you do what they want, they're going to show up again. And you want regulars. You want a community, not just like a product that you sell, like a beer.
Right. So how do you amass that? Well, it'd be through like whatever kind of entertainment you can bring in.
I think right after COVID, people will pay anything to go to live.
I think. Oh
I mean, I
my
don't know.
god.
Maybe there'll be
Parties in the
by then, but-
street. Oh my god. Can you imagine? Kensington day 1 lockdown over? Woo! Actually, maybe not day 1. Like day 3.
No, it's not quite like that, but yeah.
The
laws and the psychology are changing at the same time, but
true. What was I gonna say? Yeah. So here's the thing about all these places having closed down. I think that the artists need to be very organized, and here's the issue. It's like the PS5 being like, everyone's online waiting to buy it because they know everyone else is gonna fucking buy it. It's gonna be sold out. Well, the powers that be, they have like stock knowledge about when it's gonna like come to life, and when you can even when's COVID gonna be over, when's the best time to buy these things, and they're gonna fucking buy them up before anyone who should have it gets a chance. And then what? Then it's just gonna be fucking like condos and shit the way it's continued to go. I don't see any reason to think otherwise.
What kind of organizing were you imagining for artists then? Artists to organize how?
See, I have no idea because I don't know how the system works. I don't have an intimate enough knowledge, because it's like is there a website that you just sit on and fucking refresh like at midnight?
Do what? Buy a venue?
To like okay, well, when's this venue on sale, or when's day 1 COVID over, like best time, or the communities re-centralize. Oh, that's a blasphemous word, I'm sure, but they like come together and then decide on a new temporary universal system to maintain the most potent aspects of Toronto's culture. For now, until it gets the strength to grow.
Yeah, it'll be a patchwork of solutions, right? Like it's not clear that like which industries are going to work together the most in terms of which spaces they're going to want to try to use for what, and like multi-purpose spaces can be really interesting. Like it's good if there's like art being done at a bar.
Mini Rochdales that make money. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, the main thing is they need to not lose money.
Yeah.
To not just full.
I could definitely see the city just like squeezing them out.
Sorry?
I could see the city just squeezing them out. Like, even if they do succeed on the first move, the city's just like, well, fuck you, new post-COVID fresh air tax.
In a perfect world, the city would be aggressively subsidizing worker-managed cooperatives.
But do you think that's going to happen?
No, go tell everybody.
Like, Horton hears a who. We are here. We are
Watch
here.
Richard Wolff. Tell me if you think he's wrong. As far as I can tell, he knows what he's talking about. I'm no economics expert, but
Yeah, can you just drop his name in the chat?
Oh, on which chat?
The Discord, just so I can see it.
Okay, not in the Twitch. Richard Wolff. I mean, his talk at Google is a good start.
I'll put it in Twitter.
He's got like a show every couple of days. His wife has a show too, Harriet Fraud. She came up with Juliet for a while.
Wolf,
for
oh,
ACT.
2S.
Show together. Yeah, so like, yeah, he's like a semi-Marxist economist specializing in worker co-ops, and his wife's like a psychotherapist who has a program about the effect of capitalism on our psychology. The show is about like his like book, and his theme is democracy in the workplace. That's how he tries to brand worker cooperatives, so it doesn't sound like, oh my god, think of it just like, oh, democracy, that's a good American value. Oh wait, yeah, why don't we have any democracy, which is so American, great, or maybe it's Canadian, yay, in the workplace. And that's what Richard Wolff's whole thing is democracy in the workplace. And if you think about applying democracy, then well, what about democracy in school? Well, there was a bit more of that at Rochdale, and there was also a bit more of that in what are called the Sudbury school model, where it's about having more direct democracy in school. So if there was a world, a wider array of Sudbury schools, worker-managed cooperatives, and things like Rochdale with the checks and balances, but things where there is this reduction in the normal power difference. There's also they reduce the teacher-student power difference. I think it would be a better world. And because of different kinds of finding ways to introduce democracy where it's not currently present, putting it into the workplace, putting it into 12 schools, putting it into post-secondary.
Do you think that would have a significant effect on how fast things get done? Because especially in like a business setting, like you got to make decisions kind of quick a lot of the time, big decisions.
Well, actually, from what I've learned, actually, you can watch Michael Albert on Destiny about this. The real issue is workers stop showing up at the management meetings. So, and Michael Albert's proposal is that you have to rebalance jobs so that each person's job has like a variety of things in it, so they have more to contribute to the meeting, so they understand the structure of the company or something. It's probably not a way to address it, but the Pirate Party has a philosophy called a do-ocracy, where it's like it's kind of a democracy, but like if you act fast, like you get, and that's sort of keep things going.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, like we'll have a vote, but like if you're not here, like we're just going to keep going, like.
And I guess that's very anarchistic.
Yeah, it's kind of like agile software development ideas and that kind of thing.
Can you give me like a quick rebuttal to the most common criticisms of anarchism? Because that's just kind of where I want to start before I make a fool of myself.
You just want chaos. Well, that's not what the word means. It's more about systematically questioning power than about nobody having any power over the forces of chaos. The simplest one. That's the most common one. I mean, even Brett Weinstein and Trump, very ideologically separate, both use the word anarchism in this backwards way of just thought termination of just like, oh, complex idea. Nah, it's just people want chaos. Don't consider that. That's just silly.
It's just a stoner watching cartoons.
It's similar to something like, oh, feminism, that's just man hating.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
no,
It's so
is it
multifaceted.
yeah, and analogous to anarchism, you could see it as a kind of gender anarchism, and it's about questioning gendered power.
Mhm. So do you think, cause, Lord, forgive me for even bringing it up, but do you think that you get so much hate on Facebook because when you talk about things like polyphobia, and like polyamory and anarchism, these are like the context in which you use them are very fundamental and embody a lot of the ideas that are already in place. So it's like people don't really see its place in what you're talking about. I don't know if that
Well, I
made a
mean,
lot
I
of
hope
sense.
so, but I
Hold on.
so, but I can see it.
It's like do you think that people fuck, how the fuck do I say it? How do I describe like the behavior of an entire Facebook setting? Um it's like these are concepts that embody
The down you go, the less
democracy.
people like.
It embodies democracy, polyphobia, or like when you say monogamy, it's like you're talking about a deeper sensibility than just having one partner. But a lot of times, it's people just saying, "Oh, you hate people having one partner," but it's like it's about a
I mean,
mindset.
like so simplify it. Subtract one from both sides of the equation. When somebody has zero partners, they don't cease to be monogamous.
Right? Because it's
So
it's an
when a
orientation.
you could think of it that way. I mean, that would entail the result. I mean, but just generally speaking, you can explain it different ways, but I think people would agree generally that having zero partners doesn't cause you to not be a monogamous person or
Hmm.
not be practicing monogamy or not be into monogamy or whatever, any of those things. So it's not actually a function of your current number of partners. Um, Maybe it's what you're. In that case, you might say it's what you're aiming for, but I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't think of an asexual person as and like someone who doesn't pursue relationships at all, perhaps an extreme form of that. Um, you wouldn't think of them as like rebelling against monogamy necessarily. Maybe a little out of touch there because I'm not particularly asexual, but it's not as much of it's not a huge deviation. Like there's not the idea of monogamy isn't everybody must find a partner or they're letting the team down. It's not the idea of monogamy. The idea of monogamy is that there should be measures taken either on the individual or the collective level to stop one somewhere from getting more than one partner because that's supposed to be the maximum, and somehow this maximum is supposed to be enforced. Sometimes it's at a level of a complete, let's say, religious community or in an individual relationship that maybe sometimes has inherited those ideals from religious past, maybe even a generation or two before. Um, but yeah, so anyway, I think that the best way to use the terms is to think of polyamory as not stopping your partner from having another partner.
And that's like the first step, or that's the only step.
I say that's it. And on top of that, you could also be a slut, and there's no shame in that. But it's got nothing to do with whether you're controlling your partner. Being a slut and being controlling are completely different things. Or being a slut and being not controlling of others are completely different things.
So, do you think that polyamory and monogamy could be fluid states of being? Like, if you are, okay, so say you are a monogamous, like traditional, like regular ass person. You are, you talk to, say
Ass
monog,
person.
yeah, yeah. You say you're monogamous, like, but you're single and you sleep around and whatever, right? Really typical. Um,
Well, that's not monogamy.
but you would,
Single and I sleep. That's not monogamy.
okay, so that's what I'm thinking. So it's like if I would say a lot of people wouldn't say typically that, at least the people that I know, maybe not. They're pretty progressive. But anyway, um they wouldn't say that person's polyamorous. They would say they're single with the implication that they will find someone to be monogamous with. That's like the default for most people, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And then but So in a context you are monogamous, but then in your practice you're being polyamorous. Because even if your goals are to be quote unquote monogamous, even if that's how you rationalize it to yourself, like are you still practicing polyamory? And it's like it's kind of like like, but you can fall out of it and then want monogamy.
I would say like the you go anarchist approach to polyamory, you're coming at it from how in general do I take the least controlling approach I can imagine to things in general.
Mm-hmm.
How in general can people be as uncontrolling as possible, and then specifically how do you apply that to sex and dating? What's and of course what's possible, that's where people are going to differ, because like what do they mean by possible? But the point is just to ask that question and to ask yourself the reasonable limit. There's going to be disagreement about this, but I don't think there should be disagreement whether to ask this question. I think everyone should ask themselves this question and say, never. Here's where I do understand the motivation of something like your fictional explorations, because people need to be willing to exercise their imagination before they decide what's right or wrong. Otherwise, they're not making informed decisions formed by their own imagination. Never mind what you want to do with life. Never mind who you want to date, who you want to date, who you want to fuck, how many people, whatever, how many people you want to fuck. Just forget about it. Just say, just as a thought experiment, what's the least controlling approach you can imagine? Treat it like a muscle that you're trying to exercise. How can I imagine? And make sure you go too extreme. Make sure you go too far and say like that's exerting no will at all in life. That wouldn't work. And so overshoot. This is what I'm talking about also with the demon stuff of like exercising it like a muscle, like you want to stretch in the other direction too. So you're always like doing this, but like also doing that. And at the very least to find some kind of balance, because we live in a very controlling society, and it's a huge problem, and it's why we might be doomed. You understand what I'm saying? It's individual psychology, because that's all there is. These collectives are built out of people, and there's some emergent stuff going on as well, but if we can't even solve it on our individual level, like how do we become a less controlling society so that we are free to change the course of things? Because we are on a vehicle heading towards a cliff in terms of climate change. I think Chomsky was right to call the Republican Party the most dangerous organization in human history. So what do? It's not going to involve no change at the level of individual psychology. So what is that change? Russell Brand will say it has to be everyone just going to develop this immense empathy for everybody. I don't know. I think it's
not
a little
going to go that way.
I think I followed all that Russell Brand revolution stuff, and I knew it was a grain of salt kind of situation. I admired his spirit quite a lot, and especially the with which he did speak to people in, for instance, this town hall that he did with Jones. I was thinking it's like so unlike politicians. You just compare this town hall that Russell Brand did to literally any politician on the planet. It's like, whoa, he was actually talking to these people. He wasn't just like working the room. Like, Jesus.
You know who does do that? Sorry, you know who does do that? Putin. Allegedly. He does have those kind of intimate, he like literally sits like he's talking to children, like reading them a storybook. Like the reporters are like sitting on the ground and he's like talking to them.
Well, I'm sure that's a photo op as well, but
Definitely.
Right. Russell Brand, because I think many people have seen this intermediate conclusion of, okay, there's a crisis and there's no way out of the idea that it involves change on an individual psychological level. And it's not about your light bulbs. It's about a psychological change that enables us to take on the government. And simple. And so that's anarchism. So, we need anarchism to fight climate change. That's going to involve examining how anarchism intersects with someone's personal psychology. And, if you can't even ask these questions about your own sexuality, how are you going to question the whole fucking system?
Yeah. And do you take a more Freudian perspective where like your sexuality is a huge draw?
Put it this way. If you can't question the whole fucking system, then how are you going to question the whole fucking system?
Yeah. I like it.
That's what I'm trying to
yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're already in the category where you think you already questioned it all. Like, everybody's got to question the whole fucking system as part of questioning the whole fucking system. I don't care which part of the whole fucking system you're in.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
If you think we question it enough, we fucking haven't.
because we're not on the course to a solution right now.
Right. So yeah, again, did you think that there's do you have a more Freudian perspective that you think sexuality is like a huge draw for people's day-to-day activities?
Well, I guess I'm not. I mean, like Jung disagreed with Freud about how much everything was sexual and that kind of thing. I mean, is there? I mean, I don't know if there's an objective way to decide exactly how much of human psychology is sexual or something like that. Like, is there a specific question?
Well, it's more so like majority, I guess. Majority of like unconscious action. How much of that do you think is drawn by sexuality and like sexual identity? If you could give a percent, just like a basic stoner percent.
But you can't. No, you can't give a percent because the word's so ambiguous. Like, does sexuality include sexual selection?
Sexual identity.
That's how we all got it. But you said sexuality and sexual identity. So
okay.
Sexuality could include sexual selection, which is going back to before humans existed.
That's true.
Yes.
But even though it does go that far back, is it even that complicated? Really?
Origin, like every human thought is the consequence of sex. I mean, it's about sex.
Yeah.
But every thought is the consequence of sex.
Right.
So maybe that's a confusion that people. Maybe that's a confusion in the Freudian worldview, but especially because they were just coming to grips with Darwin, and look how much sense the Nazis made of it, right? So like, just be like, oh yeah, because of Darwin. I think basically Darwin comes around and people are like, whoa, this is relevant to everything, which is true. And then Freud's like, this must mean that everything's about sex. And the Nazis are like, this must mean that everything's about murder or something. I don't know.
Everything's about being pure genetically.
It's something about the Darwinian setup. Like Freud's looking at psychology, like, well, then people must be obsessing with this all the time if this is how it happens, how we get here.
Yeah.
And on the sexual level, and then the Nazis like obsessing on like killing people side of it. And that's gaming the system, essentially. Like, like, I don't know, you can view it that way.
Yeah.
I'm sure
we can go for hours
more people
on
talking about the virtue of war and it sharpening people up or some bullshit. I don't really believe that, but
you could definitely argue that, but
way out. They're way less common after the Holocaust. But if you go back in time, they're there, and there's fewer numbers today. But.
Wow. Okay. So basically, what I'm getting at is how much of an impact would people questioning the fucking system actually have on day-to-day usage of the system?
Well, it's certainly good practice. I mean, there's other things you could question first. I mean, you could question intellectual property. I somehow feel like that's not as effective.
Question it how?
Well, maybe it shouldn't exist. Maybe there should be no intellectual property. So, because in both cases, the fucking system and the fucking system and the intellectual property system both involve artificial scarcity. They both involve artificially restricting the supply of something that's actually abundant. In an information age, information has become abundant, so the cost of copying information has gone to zero, effectively.
Yeah. Yet video games are still fucking $80.
Storage. To pay for your hard drive.
Yeah.
I think it should be a commissioning model, but that's a whole other topic.
So,
but you can look at different kinds of artificial scarcity and artificial abundance. So allowing pollution is artificial abundance of like the environmental margin of error. It's like saying, yeah, it's fine, it's pollute. It's like, actually no, it's actually very expensive.
So then, sorry.
As opposed to saying sex is very, very scarce when actually it's more abundant than we've been conditioned to feel.
How much of that scarcity do you think is brought up by arbitrary virtues around sexual selection, like based around?
Not particularly arbitrary.
You don't think things like fashion and like the way that's pushed in society as like a way to sexually select isn't arbitrary?
Fashion's not artificial scarcity or artificial abundance. That's more like communication of like information.
No, but it causes artificial scarcity amongst people who are able to actually acquire that fashion as sexual beings.
See, I'm not wearing anything expensive. This came from Honest Ed's, actually, this green sweater 20 years ago.
The energy.
And it had a rack of like
like 50 of them, all the same. I was like, I'll have one.
That's lovely.
That seemed like artificial abundance, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But it just happened naturally, I think. But you want to price. Let me zoom out here. If you're going to put a dollar value on anything, it should be the things we need to budget, the things that are scarce. You don't need to budget how much people listen to music. No one's listening to music too much.
Mm.
There's artists that are getting paid too little.
Definitely.
But you don't have to reduce how much people listen to music to pay artists more money. That's artificial. The whole relationship is artificial.
Sorry. Okay, I don't really see how that goes into what I was saying about how, like, if you have like if you make fashion, sorry, oh my god, excuse me, if you make fashion like a way to sexually select as like a societal virtue by the powers that be they sinister or benign.
Anyways, that nobody made that true. There's
Well,
no decision to be made.
you don't think that manufactured consent is potent?
Oh, sorry. So the connection is that you can have a system of fashion which doesn't depend on how expensive something is.
Yeah. But it's
But-
more
when
so
you're talking-
it's driving
about
what you
class-
look like to be
Well, you're not
sexual.
talking about fashion. You're not talking about fashion. You're talking about classism in fashion.
I suppose so. This is my failing as someone to engage in like a dialect with, is that I am pure rhetoric. I have no formal like knowledge or like way to like classify things. Like I'll describe things that, and there's like, I just sound so fucking dumb because it's like, okay, no, that's not fashion. That's classism in fashion.
Well, it's not about just like finding the right term for it. Like it's about taking a certain stance on it of like, like rewarding people for having more money. In a way, is classist. I mean, you
Yeah,
can say
yeah.
that it's like free and then becomes classism, something like that. I mean, this is kind of what people will say about income inequality, that most people don't want completely flat distribution, and most people don't want it like this, where it's like two rich people and everyone else in the sewer.
Mhm.
So it's like what the people actually want is something in between. And so maybe people want like fashion to be some indication of like resources or something. I don't know. There have been no shortage. There's no shortage of human groups which make everybody dress the same for all sorts of reasons. And it's not all militaries, although it's often culty religions, but schools, uniforms, and workplaces, and the police, and all these kinds of things. It's not always about groupthink, although it very easily can be, especially the shaving your head in the military, which is the
Oh yeah.
hair anyway. But that's one of the like for instance, one of the arguments for school uniforms is that it's less classist, and the poor kids and the rich kids look the same, other than they're like dental workers, depending on the country. You know what I mean? But like, it reduces that difference by a lot. And so then, I mean, because I went to a school that didn't have a uniform, so I didn't really have this context to think about it until I heard about it later as an adult. This line of reasoning, it's like, I guess it's true that like how much money you afford for a uniform makes less of a difference. So how much money you can afford for clothes makes less of a difference than everyone's just wearing the same thing.
Well, except for the fact that uniforms are like $600 in total.
Right. Although, but you don't need. Yeah, they could subsidize it and all that thing. But
It's the
I'm talking
idea
about
is sound, but it's corrupt.
look, that's like saying the tuition is classist. Essentially, it could have been factored in the tuition or covered or something. But like, I'm talking just in terms of, because the students might not be aware of what their parents are paying anyway.
Yeah. But do you think that the uniform gets rid of some of the criteria for sexual selection within like high schools, or is it like, or does the amount of criteria just shift to other more like detailed aspects of the person?
There's no guarantee it's going to be more or less detailed, but like, hopefully people are paying less attention to who can dress expensively.
Right, so it doesn't really matter like that people are gonna judge each other regardless. It's more
You
so
know,
what they judge each other on.
well, I mean, this is kind of a meta preferences kind of question of like, what do you want other people to want each other for? Do you want a world where people value other people based on how expensive their clothes are?
Right.
And you can ask, well, I don't know, what would that world be like? Oh, wait, it might be really shitty. So what's a better world then? One where people value each other for other reasons. I mean, what if the hottest thing was honesty or something like that, or courage?
Here's the
Rather
thing
than
about fashion though, and like the uniform argument, is that the idea that clothes have to be expensive to be accepted is exceptionally antiquated. It's so like 90s sitcom. And nowadays, I feel like most of the time people want things that look good. And you don't have to look good with just expensive clothes. Expensive doesn't make it look good. There's a whole like subsection of modern fashion that's based on thrift shopping.
Sure.
Like I think like
Yeah,
so
and
that, I think that
and
makes uniforms like antiquated and kind of like archaic.
that fashion expresses a different politics.
Yeah, and it's shifted, but the education system hasn't shifted with it.
Well, it's shifted for some people. It depends what industry you're in and what your life is. Like there are lots of, it's not like there aren't lots of people in Toronto left who still care about whether someone else has expensive clothes or whether they have expensive clothes. I mean, like I don't know if you met a lawyer ever, or like
Yeah, but it seems like it seems like the Catholic school system cares a lot.
um,
They care more than
well,
people actually do, and I think it's just so they can keep making money off the uniforms every year. It's like how much thousands of dollars are they making?
well, yeah, that might be why the prices get jacked up now. But as far as what motivates the policy in the first place, um, I do think it is motivated. Because remember, I was saying that anarchism took some inspiration from Christianity. It is inspired by this ideal of like sort of leveling the playing field in various ways, and like we all have a infinite soul, et cetera, et cetera.
You don't think the playing field is leveled out itself? Like not even in like a big way, like literally just in the way people deal with fashion.
I mean, I don't think I want my kids in the future, if I develop children, to go to a school with uniforms, just because I think individual expression is very important, and um, I maybe it's not such a big deal. Maybe, in fact, maybe this way you can find out who is classist at your high school.
Yeah, it's like why wouldn't you want the Nazis to have their tattoos out so that way you could see who they are?
Yeah, in fact, I was just thinking sunlight is the best disinfectant. So I mean, yeah,
That's
let people
true.
express themselves who they really are. Yeah, express yourself so everyone knows who you are. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about free speech. That's why the whole idea of like censored speech is very misguided, because it's like okay, you may not want to bear witness to it, but it'll be there just where you can't hear it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the reasonable limitations are. There's going to be a few, but libel, threats, that kind of thing.
Threatening people, the only reason I think threatening people should be actively illegal is because you can use it as a kind of like trump card for manipulation. It needs to be banned in the meta. It's too good of a card.
Oh, it's a huge part of coercive control, just the mere threat of violence. Every abusive relationship that involves even one assault then contains the implicit threat of the next assault
Yeah.
in that relationship. That carries over even if that assault was in a previous relationship, right? Because it's just at a certain point you learn that it's more likely that people will do that.
Yeah. Whereas you are completely allowed to corner people economically and threaten them with like a fucking like big brain capitalist chess move, and that's totally allowed, and it's actually quite admirable by the society. It's I don't know, it kind of seems like the same thing to me.
Well, yeah, that situation could be better with more worker cooperatives, but there's a imagination gap of like people don't come up with co-op ideas; they come up with business ideas.
Hmm.
Uh,
Harder to start a co-op than a business. I mean, have you ever tried? It seems like something you would do.
yeah, I might start a software development co-op at some point.
Ooh, good one.
In a way, the house concerts that we're doing here, they were essentially like one-off co-ops, like co-op pop-ups, because each concert, everything was divided evenly between the performers. There was kind of no overhead because the venue was the residence of one of the performers, and so everyone had equal skin in the game as
Yeah.
far as finance. So advertising was equally important to everyone, and it just gets divided. I mean, now it gets subtle even at that small level of like, do you divide it per act or per person? Decided that because our space is really small, that per act makes better sense because that incentivizes smaller acts, and so it's like a for pared down kind of format. And,
Right. But what if someone did like a 10-minute god tier act of like pure euphoria? Do they not deserve a little bit more? Or should the fact that they got to perform that be the reward?
But you're talking if somebody's drawing more guests, or
Well, no, because you said like it's per act, like if you get paid per act, so there's more acts.
well, I don't know. I think music's kind of subjective, so I mean, I don't think there's like should be such an objective answer like this was the better. But like, I don't know. I mean, the
But like in the moment, I feel like you could probably tell.
I don't know. I don't see why it's necessary in that case to introduce a power difference of one performer is getting paid, one act is getting paid. It's already introducing a power difference if like one is a trio and one is a duo. The duo, the people in the duo are going to make a bit more. So there's already some power difference to begin with, like, just in terms of income difference. I think to be like methodically anarchist is like don't introduce a power difference until it's justified. I don't see the reason I wouldn't want there to be a further difference of like, oh, this act is making more than that.
Right.
Like if there's somebody that was hard to get, I might just make sure that they were.
It would be more so. It'd be more like a. It wouldn't be like a consistent thing. It'd be like an exception. Like the way I visualize it's very cartoonish. It's like the Shakespearean like theater, and like someone goes up to perform, and it's kind of like whatever, and then someone else goes up to perform, and it's like 10 minutes later, and they're all like crying, and they stand up, give them like a standing ovation.
I think that's just expressed in who's likely to go to their next shows, because these all the same people performing together on every possible concert. So it's like someone goes to a show, they see 3 acts, they pay their cover, it gets divided evenly between the acts, and then the one that they like the most, they're going to go to that person's next show.
Yeah.
In the iterated case that the better performers are going to make more money because they're going to get more repeat business. You don't need it. You don't need to, because putting it in the event, like you already have the social dynamics of the social event, and people are all worried about who thinks their music and who thinks they're cool and whatever, and like which music think that they're cool or whatever. I don't know. People are concerned about, but it's just sometimes you find out that people are concerned about something in these social situations. It's like there's already so much going on. Why introduce this like pecking order of like, oh, which performer is the headliner who's going to get more and they're going to play for longer? Like,
but what happens if it, or what if it happens naturally? Like oh my God, Adam, when I
when I were doing booked slots, like half-hour slots.
Well, I mean, okay, so when I came to the first of your shows that I came to from Artery, Artery, I came to see Eden, and God, I can't even fucking speak. Adam, her music is so moving. I couldn't believe it. It was like something I had never experienced in all my life. I was touched by angels. It was I'm lost. So anyway, if someone like her, if you have like another one,
I wanted her to play her.
What?
That's why I wanted her to play her.
Yeah. So if you have someone like that, and I'm on Artery and I'm scrolling through, like naturally I'm gonna go to the event that Eden's there for. Even if she has equal opportunity, she's naturally gonna have more influence. Like she's still the headliner, quote unquote, just in people's hearts.
Well, for you, I mean, everyone's got different preferences. There's no reason that if you've got 3 acts to with people, you don't need everyone in the room to be equally interested in all of the acts. There's no reason for that to be important at all. It's just like, and also you want people to be exposed to stuff that is outside their comfort zone, right? So like people come for one thing and they hear contrasting things, and it's like sometimes they'll discover something they didn't realize they liked, or sometimes they'll confirm, no, I really don't like jazz, or whatever their thing is that they don't like. and
So you think
but
it's sorry.
for instance, I think it's important to have different genres on the same bill,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
different
yeah.
genders, and anything like that. Diversity of you want a diverse program any way you can, musically diverse, anything.
Um,
The more diversity, the better. That's meta diversity.
right. So you're okay with someone just happening to amass the most fans in the room, but like as long as it happens naturally, you wouldn't want to push that. So it's like you're still presenting everyone equally, so that way the two people who are there for someone else has the same experience.
And like, well, and there's, you shouldn't be trying to quantify your experience of the music anyway. You should be making sure the artists get paid.
Yeah.
It's not a contest. It's nothing to do with like, the worst thing that you can ask somebody right after a concert or a movie is, do you think it was good
Ooh.
or bad, or do you think it was bad? Because what you're doing is you are aborting their entire reflection process.
So you should be asking yourself though. The question isn't bad. It's if someone else asks you.
No, don't ask yourself either. No, why would you do it to yourself?
Oh.
Oh, because you're not giving you any. It's a reductive question. You're saying, let's take that entire movie, reduce it to one bit of information. Why would you do that? The reason you would do that if you want to lose most of the information. And not learn anything from it.
If you just say
if
that
you
was
jump
good or that was bad.
bits of information are in a 2-hour movie. Let's say, like in your brain, let's say it's 5 gigs of data.
Yeah.
To pick a big arbitrary number. Okay, so you got 5 gigs stewing around in your head. You just had a 5 gig download of like an intense emotional film.
Whew.
Someone's first move to themselves or to someone else is, okay, let's reduce that to 1 bit of information. Was it good or bad? That's stupid.
Yeah. It lacks nuance.
Why have so much information if you're going to compress it so aggressively?
Well, here's the thing. Dumb shit. Okay, this is one of the greatest sayings, is that the sage swims in the waters that the lunatic drowns in.
I've heard that one.
Yeah, so it's like, if you're a sage, you can just say, good. And it's like, oh shit, it was fucking good. And it's like, you just know.
No, that's not the right contrast. No. It's not that you already have the answer. The answer itself is destructive.
How
the
so?
answer is reductive, reducing it to 1 bit. Instead of saying, is it good or bad, you should just be letting it cause you to think of other things and to expand on that and to have the thoughts grow. The file size should increase.
Yeah. But that could be happening, but you just don't communicate it. But that's like a whole like Buddhist perspective.
Well, it's harder to do that when someone's asking you to compress all.
Yeah.
It's hard. If somebody's asking you to compress a file, or you're asking yourself to compress a file while you're also trying to grow in size, it means you have to make a copy actually, and you might forget. In that process, you've taken away from the growth. Like that takes resources away from the growth of the reflection.
So here's the thing. If someone says yes or no immediately, it's either they're bullshitting you, which is the most common, or they're a sage, which just means that they have a fucking sick CPU and they just fucking download that shit so fast.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think anyone could have that type of like instant insight?
No, because it's a question about being able to get to the answer quickly. It's about whether it's good to get to the answer quickly. I'm saying it's bad to get the answer quickly.
There's no level of processes that could expedite it?
Because you want the digressions. It's a creative thing. You're watching a creative thing. It's supposed to make you creative.
Yeah.
Not reductive.
Well, again, I guess that's why I say it's kind of Buddhist, because I guess Buddhism would reject like the creativity, like growth, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I know. That would play on Buddhism. But you see what I'm saying? It's about growing the file size. So like you just download a bunch of 5 gigs of data. Like instead of saying did that suck or not, you could say, what do you think would happen next in the story?
Yeah.
Or what do you think happened before the beginning? Or what do you think so and so was thinking?
Yeah, it's fun to say it as a goof after a movie, to be like, oh, that movie was shit. But then when people really just like instantly be like, well, I didn't like that one bit. That was that was a bad movie. It's like, well, if you really mean that, like, instantly, like, that's kind of, I don't know, it grosses me out a bit.
I feel like maybe at the root of it, there's a fear of showing vulnerability and like uncertainty. Showing that uncertainty they might be used to people who would press them and be like, "Oh, you don't know what you think, eh?" Or something. It's like it's because you have to push back against that kind of thing and be like, "That I don't know what I'm thinking because I'm thinking about it." You know, it's like I'm soaking it in, and like yeah, I mean, it's similar to like listening to 2 seconds of a piece of music and being like, "Oh, I hate this genre." Or something. It's just like, well, probably because you never listen to it because you start about hate 2 seconds into it every time that it comes on. I mean, like, what if you had to empathize with this genre to save your life? You know,
It is it is natural to be adverse to things though. So it's like, but it's about continuing to try and like it. It's like I don't blame people for not having an open mind because
not even that. No, it's not even that. Because trying to like it is still reductive. That's trying to give the answer 1 instead of the answer 0, but those are both 1 bit.
But you already know why you don't like it, so you might as well try and like it.
Suspending judgment. This judgment is reductive. You're reducing things. So if you want to stay creative, you have to suspend judgment.
And you don't. Okay, so you don't combat opposites, or you don't use like the good to combat the bad. It doesn't like equal out like that.
What I'm trying to suggest is it's a capitalist infestation of art to try to put a dollar value or something like that on an artwork instead of engaging with it. And people socially end up acting like they're in a marketplace they're like in an auction or something after a movie, like they're negotiating the value of the movie as if one of them's buying it from the other one.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no financial transaction taking place here. It doesn't matter whether you wasted your money because the money's already fucking spent. The question is, well, maybe that's more normal to say the question, but like, why not see what other thoughts it brings up for you? You know, like, who cares how much it's worth on a free market? Like, you already paid for it. You already made that decision. Like, and you don't have to figure out right now whether you're going to be losing money the next time you purchase a movie ticket or whatever, like losing value the next time. Like, you can think about that question later, and it's actually not that important. But it's made important by this feeling of it being a contest. Like, oh, that because people are like, oh yeah, that movie wasn't worth those $20, and I hate it, or it sets you up as superior to the movie, and it's a dominance thing as opposed to let's feel something.
Yeah, people will literally say, oh, it's not worth seeing in theaters. Like, watch it, don't see it in theaters.
Like, don't tell me whether I should go, tell me what you thought.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, what was I gonna say? God damn it. It's this thing's fault. So there's obviously a commercialized aspect to it, and like a capitalism aspect to it. But I think when people have such an immediate, like, inflammatory reaction to it, I feel like it's because the medium has like shown them something that they're avoiding within themselves, and a lot of it is because a lot of things get highly inflammatory responses nowadays because most media is at the very least subtly political. So there's always something you like or don't like. It's never like
people are not,
no, go ahead.
Also not willing to spend judgment of the other in politics.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it's not. It might be changing, but like, say, as a Democrat in the U.S., it wouldn't have been seen very fashionable to be like uncertain about, you know, whether Trump voters are evil or not, or whether they have a legitimate difference of opinion. But regardless of what's actually the case there, it's the idea is you're supposed to have made it in a judgment already.
Yeah. It's never a question.
Kind of attitude.
It's like you have to have that context in order to engage with the media, which is a little it's a little perverse. It's a little propaganda-y, and like obviously you see it on both sides. the
We
difficulty.
were talking about principle of charity earlier, and like that's what's really toxic about a lot of online discourse is instead of a norm in favor of the principle of charity, there's like a norm against it. You're
Right. It's
Will take it-
dangerous. It's dangerous.
well, people will tell you you're bad for listening to the other side. They'll tell you this.
Yeah. It's
And-
risky.
And you'll be
Seductive.
like, why? What do you think they're saying? And often they'll be like, well, I don't know because I don't listen to them because I'm better. It's like, okay.
Yeah. When really all they
No.
said, they just fucking sound like an anime villain.
Because someone else told them and punished them.
Yeah.
They were threatened with social ostracism rather than compelled by the force of reason, which is much more forceful when it's working correctly.
Not to mention the fact that there's like righteous indignation that comes from engaging with these communities, so it just constantly feeds back. But that this type of thing has been talked to about to death, about like the fucking like psychology of political groups. Okay, I really have to pee. We're approaching 4 hours, so I think we can wrap up.
Right.
Some things were left in an ADD filled like rattling mess, so that's fine. I'll
Well,
listen.
I think we'll get some interesting clips out of this at the very least. I don't know how many people will make it through the 4 hours, but I can think of a few segments that we should clip out.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't wait to listen back to it. And I'm going to kick myself so hard because there's going to be so many things I've wanted to expand it on that I can't think of that just got like bulldozed over by both of our fucking crazy ramblings. So thank you so much for doing this. Honestly, thank you. Do you want to shout yourself out to the one person still watching on my end?
Well, follow me on Facebook, and you might start to make sense of all this gibberish.
That's all you need to know. Okay, thank you, Adam. You are a beautiful man. I often describe you as the hippie vampire, so that is the perfect sign.
I don't bite.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Have a good one, sir.
Holy shit, friends. I can't believe it. I finally had him on, and it was glorious. A truly beautiful man. God in heaven, are his Facebook posts fucking irritating, though. No one irritates me more than Adam. But, I love it. And I hope he comes back on. I can't wait to look back at this. Someone sent a YouTube clip in the chat at, like, the very beginning. So I'm going to open that up right now. Beautiful, man. That's perfect. Can't see me anymore, but I'm fucking dancing, dog. It's so funny because Scott tried to rickroll me a few streams ago. And it didn't work. Okay, I'm just gonna put my video back up here. Say goodbye. I don't want to draw this out too long. Woo! Wait. Okay, goodbye, friends.